During the Taisho period in Japan, Tanjiro Kamado lived a peaceful life with his family before a devastating tragedy changed everything. He was the eldest of 5 siblings, Nezuko, Takeo, Hanako, Shigeru, and Rokuta, and helped his mother, Kikamado, care for the younger ones ever since they lost their father to illness. Even at just 13 years old, Tanjiro took on many household responsibilities and became the family's great pillar. Tanjiro's routine was tranquil until the fateful day he left to make one of his charcoal deliveries. An elderly man advised him not to return that night, as the road was dangerous, and he decided to wait until dawn. Upon returning home the following day, Tanjiro found what would be the worst scene of his life. His mother and siblings were dead, and the house was covered in blood. All signs pointed to a demon having done this, and the one responsible was Muzan Kibutsuji. Nezuko, his youngest sister, was the only survivor, but she had been turned into a demon as part of one of Muzan's experiments. Desperate, Tanjiro ran to the nearest village seeking help for his sister, but soon realized she had fully transformed and ended up being attacked by her along the way. The situation grew even more complicated when Jiu Tomioka, one of the pillars of the Demon Slayer Corps, appeared. As the water pillar, Jiu was ready to eliminate Nezuko, who had turned into a demon. However, even under attack, Tanjiro protected his sister with everything he had, arguing that she was not like the other demons and remained innocent. Impressed by Tanjiro's determination and sensing that humanity still remained in Nezuko, Giyu decided to spare them both and sent them to find Sakonji Urokodaki, his former master. Tanjiro then set out in search of Urokodaki. Along the way, he faced a demon that had destroyed another family, but surprisingly, Nezuko helped defeat it, once again proving she was different from the other demons. After finally finding Sakonji Urokodaki, Tanjiro underwent various tests and became his apprentice, with the goal of joining the Demon Slayer Corps. However, before joining the organization, he had to endure rigorous training to prepare for the final selection, a challenge that granted entry into the rank of Demon Slayer. The training lasted around 2 years, during which Tanjiro and Nezuko formed a deep bond with Urokodaki. During the final selection, Tanjiro encountered the spirits of Sabaito and Makomo, 2 former students of his master who had lost their lives in the same trial. They guided him, and over time they developed a friendship with Tanjiro, offering him valuable advice for his journey. After this period, Tanjiro received Urokodaki's approval to take the exam. Having split an enormous boulder with his sword, he then departed for the final selection, leaving Nezuko in his master's care. At the exam site, Tanjiro, along with around 20 other young people, received instructions from the organization and began his trial, facing various demons. Using everything he had learned from Urokodaki, Tanjiro managed to defeat the first monsters with relative ease. Ever kind and selfless, he didn't think only of himself, trying to help other participants in the test. His greatest challenge was facing the Hand Demon, an ancient creature that Sakonji Urokodaki had imprisoned in the past, when he was still young. The demon harbored deep resentment toward Urokodaki and therefore tried to kill Tanjiro, just as he had done with the other disciples of his master who participated in the final selection, including Sabito and Makomo. Upon discovering that his friends who appeared on the Misty Mountain were already dead, Tanjiro was furious and heartbroken, but managed to defeat the demon. In the end, Tanjiro succeeded and passed the test after 7 days, being among only 5 survivors. He returned exhausted to Urokodaki, now as an official demon slayer. 15 days later, a swordsmith named Haganezuka delivered to Tanjiro a katana he had forged for him. Shortly after, Tanjiro received his first mission as an official member of the Demon Slayer Corps to investigate and resolve the disappearances of young people in a small town. Arriving there, Tanjiro discovered that young girls who had not yet turned 16 were mysteriously disappearing, something clearly the work of a demon. He was already wearing the resistant uniform of the Demon Slayer Corps, showing his growing evolution. Tanjiro quickly found the demon responsible for the crimes. This demon used his blood demon art to create copies of himself and kidnap the girls, taking them to an underground swamp, a dimension of his own where he devoured them. In a quick battle against the human eater, Tanjiro demonstrated a remarkable evolution, using more refined strikes, and also received help from Nezuko, who for the first time used her demon powers. Nezuko saved Tanjiro during the fight, and at the end of the confrontation he came out practically unscathed. Tanjiro recovered the belongings of the women who had been killed by the demon and set off on his second mission, where there were rumors of a hidden demon. Upon arriving in the city, Tanjiro encountered his greatest enemy, Muzan Kibutsuji. Tanjiro spotted him in the middle of a crowd, disguised as a human and accompanied by a family that knew nothing about his true nature, which made Tanjiro hesitate. to get rid of Tanjiro, Muzan transformed a random person into a demon, causing a great commotion and escaping in the process. While Tanjiro tried to contain the transformed man, he received help from Tamayo, a doctor who was also a demon and had freed herself from Muzan's curse, and from her assistant Yushiro. Yushiro was also a demon, transformed by Tamayo herself as a last resort to save him from an illness. The two lived without devouring humans, hiding from place to place and concealing their presence. Meanwhile, Muzan bid farewell to his family and headed into an alley where he killed a drunk who provoked him. He then ordered two demons to bring him Tanjiro's head. Meanwhile, Yushiro led the Kamado siblings to Tamayo. After introducing themselves, Tamayo promised to cure Nezuko, asking Tanjiro to, throughout his journey, collect and send her blood samples from demons who carried large quantities of Muzan's blood in their veins for research. After this, they were unexpectedly attacked by two demons sent by Muzan. The Kamado siblings fought together again. After Yushiro granted his special vision abilities to Tanjiro, he managed to defeat Yaiba. Then Tamayo used her blood demon art to defeat Susumaru. After overcoming their enemies, the Kamado siblings said farewell to their new friends and headed southwest. Along the way, Tanjiro encountered Zenitsu Agatsuma, who was another of the 5 survivors of the final selection. Zenitsu was harassing a girl, persistently asking her to marry him, which Tanjiro did not appreciate at all. Tanjiro helped the girl get rid of Zenitsu and scolded the cowardly young man. After introducing themselves, the two were summoned to an emergency mission, heading to a house where a demon with drums attached to its body was causing trouble. Upon arriving there, Tanjiro and Zenitsu met Inosuke Hashibira, another demon slayer who had gone through the final selection alongside them. With their unique personalities, the trio joined forces to face the demons. Tanjiro fought against the most powerful demon, the drum demon, and managed to save some people. Despite Zenitsu being extremely cowardly, he proved to be very strong by defeating one of the demons, and after Tanjiro defeated the drum demon, he collected his blood and sent it to Tamayo. When Tanjiro left the house, he found Zenitsu protecting the box where Nezuko was hidden, as Inosuke wanted to kill her. Tanjiro and Inosuke got into a brief fight, but Tanjiro managed to calm the hot-headed boy with a headbutt, and after that the 4 of them set off together for the next mission. Along the way, the Slayers found a house where they were welcomed and cared for by an elderly woman. Upon arriving, the woman welcomed them warmly, offering rest and care. After being fed and resting, they began to get to know each other better. When Tanjiro introduced Nezuko to Zenitsu, he argued with Tanjiro, claiming that such a place was no place for such a beautiful girl. After Tanjiro explained Nezuko's situation, Zenitsu calmed down, but continued acting like a lovesick fool over the girl. After this, they were summoned again to another emergency mission. Tanjiro, carrying Nezuko, followed his new friends Inosuke and Zenitsu toward Mount Natagumo. As they approached, Zenitsu sensed something evil, and shortly after the Slayers found a young man lying on the ground asking for help. However, before they could save him, something pulled him into the mountain. The Slayers then faced a family of spider demons. These demons were so powerful that not even the 10 Slayers who had arrived before them could defeat them, and it bears noting that those Slayers were experienced. Faced with this situation, Kagaya Ubayashiki, leader of the Demon Slayer Corps, realized he had made a grave mistake and decided to send the Hashira to the location. The Hashira are demon slayers of the highest level, and when Tanjiro entered the mountain, he saw several slayers being controlled and cruelly killed by the demons. Furious, Tanjiro, in partnership with Inosuke, managed to defeat one of the demons, giving it a peaceful and tranquil death. Before dying, the demon, impressed by Tanjiro's kindness, warned him about the presence of one of the 12 Kazuki. The 12 Kazuki are the most powerful demons, divided between upper ranks and lower ranks. Meanwhile, Zenitsu faced another demon. During this battle, it was revealed that Zenitsu had been trained by his grandfather, who was a former Hashira. His hair had turned yellow after being struck by lightning, and Zenitsu demonstrated his powers in the most epic fashion possible. Even after defeating the demon, Zenitsu fell poisoned. Fortunately, Shinobu Kocho, one of the Hashira, arrived in time and saved him. After separating, Tanjiro and Inosuke faced different demons. The demon Inosuke faced proved to be very strong, but fortunately, Gyu Tomioka, one of the Hashira, arrived in time to save him. Meanwhile, Tanjiro faced Rui, one of the 12 Kizuki, who mistreated his own family, in quotation marks, which enraged Tanjiro. After having his sword broken and being saved by Nezuko, Rui was fascinated and wished to have Nezuko as his sister. During this fight, notable moments occurred, such as Nezuko using her demon powers and Tanjiro awakening a new ability, the Hinokami Kagura, a breathing technique taught by his father that allowed him to dance without tiring. Tanjiro believed he had killed Rui, but the demon survived. However, before Rui could kill him, Giyu Tomioka arrived in time and eliminated him. Afterward, the story of how that demon family was formed was revealed. Shortly after, Shinobu appeared and killed the last demon with her poison, saving one of the slayers. It was then shown how Rui obtained his powers, granted directly by Muzan Kibutsuji. When Shinobu found Tanjiro, she attempted to execute Nezuko but was stopped by Giyu. The Kamado siblings were then ordered to appear at Demon Slayer Corps headquarters. After the battle, Tanjiro and Nezuko were taken to HQ, where a meeting of the 9 Hashira took place to decide the siblings' future. Although many of the pillars initially opposed them, the two were accepted by the organization after passing a trial. After the events of Mount Natagumo, the new Demon Slayers began a recovery training period at the Butterfly Estate, supervised by Shinobu. During the training, Tanjiro refined his breathing techniques and grew closer to Shinobu. Zenitsu and Inosuke initially avoided the training sessions, but upon seeing Tanjiro's dedication, they decided to apply themselves fully once again. Shortly after, Tanjiro received a new sword from his personal swordsmith, as the previous one had been broken. Inosuke also received new swords, but modified them however he wanted, chipping them and creating a kind of serrated edge with them. Meanwhile, the hideout where Muzan and some of the 12 Kazuki were gathered was revealed. Muzan, furious at the failures of some demons, killed them, demonstrating his immense power. He then offered a generous dose of his blood to the sole survivor and gave him the mission of killing one of the Hashira. As a reward, he promised even more blood if he also managed to kill Tanjiro. Meanwhile, Tanjiro and his friends departed on a mission to the Infinity Train, where Kyojuro Rengoku was already investigating a series of mysterious disappearances. Once aboard the train, the lights began to flicker. One of the workers was attacked by a demon. The demon appeared at one of the windows, and shortly after killed the worker. The story then takes us to a restaurant where two demon slayers were conversing, one of them being Rengoku. They discussed precisely the Infinity Train and the recent attacks in various cars, making clear it was not an isolated incident. Around 40 passengers had mysteriously disappeared after boarding the train. Due to these attacks and disappearances, the Infinity Train had its operations suspended. After the conversation, Rengoku and another Slayer went to the train to investigate what had happened and locate the demon responsible. Upon arriving at the station, Rengoku encountered an elderly woman and her granddaughter who were selling food to survive. Upon approaching and speaking with them, the two revealed that since the attacks began, they had been living in fear, and mentioned believing that the one causing the fatalities was the slasher demon. Rengoku then bought all the bento boxes they were selling and promised to resolve the case. Afterward, Rengoku discovered the workshop where the Infinity Train was being maintained. Carrying the bento boxes, he headed to the workshop, where he introduced himself as part of the train's administration, saying he had been sent to deliver the meal to the workers. While some ate, others conversed with Rengoku, who took the opportunity to ask questions about the train. One of the workers explained that the train had been decommissioned due to a rumor that it was devouring people, making them disappear. For that reason, the train had been shut down. The worker also said that although they had examined the train several times, they found nothing abnormal, and for that reason, they were only carrying out maintenance so it could return to normal operation. During the conversation, a scream echoed through the workshop and Rengoku quickly ran to investigate. Upon arriving at the scene, he found a worker on the ground, and before him, the demon responsible for the attacks. The demon was holding another worker hostage, pressing its claws into the victim's face while gripping the body tightly. The demon began speaking with Rengoku, explaining its plan and the criteria it used to select its victims. It said that if the human had a pleasant smell and tasty flesh, it would eat him. Otherwise, it would simply kill him, enjoying his suffering and hurting him slowly. After saying all this, the demon demonstrated its special ability, tremendous speed, and began running around the workshop. Rengoku wanted to stop it as quickly as possible, but the demon had a hostage, so he needed to be careful not to harm him. The demon then explained that the Slayers had arrived late at the station and that the previous night it had already claimed another victim, a young woman it had left sprawled across the train tracks. Rengoku countered by saying they had arrived much earlier and that the girl had been rescued and hospitalized, which angered the demon, who now wanted to finish the job it had started. Rengoku added that she was being kept safe and would soon return to a normal life, away from it and other demons. This infuriated the demon. It then caught the scent of the bento boxes and discovered that there were two women at the station who had sold them to the Slayer. With that, the demon planned its revenge against the Slayers by quickly killing the hostage and going after the girl and her grandmother. However, before it could kill the hostage, Rengoku moved with great speed and agility, cutting off the demon's arm and saving the young man. The demon quickly recovered and ran toward the tracks, saying it would devour the girl and her grandmother before Rengoku could save them. As soon as the demon ran toward the women, Rengoku also began running along the tracks and activated his powers using flame breathing. He moved as fast as the demon, reaching the station at high speed. In the meantime, the demon reached the two at the station and began hurting the girl as she tried to flee. But before it could cause any real harm, Rengoku appeared at a surprising speed, cutting the demon's heel and preventing it from maintaining its high speed and from escaping. Even with its foot cut, the demon seemed confident in its abilities and challenged Rengoku without hesitation. It proposed a speed duel, wanting to know who would be faster, the Hashira cutting off its head or it killing the little girl's grandmother. However, this duel did not last long, for shortly after the demon boasted of its speed, Rengoku attacked it using flame-breathing first form, cut off the demon's head, and put an end to the threat on the train. While Rengoku made his moves, the little girl's grandmother watched everything calmly, and a memory surfaced in her mind. Years ago, a demon slayer had saved her from a similar situation, and that slayer's movements were similar to what she had just witnessed. She turned to Rengoku and asked if he had been the one responsible for saving her that time. The Hashira replied that it had probably been his father, also saying he was glad to be able to save her again from great danger. After the conversation, the slayer who had been with Rengoku at the beginning appeared again, but after defeating the demon, Rengoku stated they should be more cautious. According to him, a demon that had eaten more than 40 people would not be so weak as to be defeated with a single blow. Thus, Rengoku concluded that the demon had been merely a distraction, bait used to deceive the slayers. He then declared that on the Infinity Train's next journey, he would board as a passenger with the intention of investigating the attacks more thoroughly and eliminating the threat. The following day, before boarding the train, he stopped again to buy bento boxes from Fuko and her grandmother. Rengoku mentioned that when he returned home, he would tell his father about the adventure and about the two women he had met at the station. Before the train departed, Tanjiro, Zenitsu, and Inosuke arrived at the station. Upon boarding the train, Tanjiro came face to face with Rengoku, a charismatic, kind person with an unshakable strength and sense of justice. Tanjiro asked the Flame Pillar if he knew anything about the Hinokami Kagura he had used during his fight against Rui. Rengoku replied that he knew nothing about the Hinokami Kagura. Shortly after, a suspicious-looking man entered the car to check the tickets of all the passengers. Suddenly, a demon appeared, but Rengoku defeated it easily with a single blow. Tanjiro, Inosuke, and Zenitsu were impressed by the Hashira's strength and asked to become his students. With his strong sense of justice, Rengoku accepted on the spot, responding vibrantly. Later, the Slayers rested and were captured in a nightmare by Enmu, the demon we met at the end of the first season, who had received a large amount of Muzan's blood. His blood demon art allows him to put his victims to sleep and mark train tickets with his blood, which also grants him access to the Slayer's dreams, where he attempts to destroy their spiritual cores, leaving them as empty shells with no memories. Enmu ordered young people to tie ropes to the Slayers in order to enter their dreams and destroy their spiritual cores. While asleep, Tanjiro and his companions had happy dreams. Tanjiro dreamed of his entire family alive and happy, a touching scene since the entire Kamado family had been exterminated by demons. Zenitsu dreamed of a perfect life alongside Nizuko, Tanjiro's sister. In these dreams, Zenitsu appeared courageous and determined, very different from his personality in reality. Inosuke's dream, on the other hand, was somewhat bizarre, in which he freed his companions who possessed animal characteristics. Rengoku dreamed of his family. In the dream, he told his father he had become a Hashira, but his father seemed indifferent and called him despicable. In the past, Rengoku's father, Shinjuro Rengoku, had also been a Hashira, an enthusiastic man, but something caused him to abandon his post as a demon slayer. After being dismissed by his father, Rengoku's younger brother, Senjuro, who had lost his mother at a young age, asked whether their father was happy that Rengoku had become a Hashira. Rengoku, being honest, told his brother that their father had not cared. However, this would not dampen his passion, and he then offered words of encouragement to Senjuro, demonstrating his strong and unshakable spirit. Meanwhile, the young people were searching for each Slayer's spiritual core. When one of the girls found Rengoku's core and was about to destroy it, the Hashira, with his powerful survival instinct, unconsciously grabbed her by the throat, while murmuring that she must not destroy the core. Tanjiro quickly realized he was in a dream and that the perfect life he was experiencing was merely an illusion. Upon realizing this, with his spirit weakened, he began searching for a way to escape that nightmare, while his sister Nezuko tried to help him get out of the dream. With Nezuko's help, he discovered that the only way to wake up was to cut his own neck within the dream, which proved to be a great challenge, while his spiritual core demonstrated how calm and comforting it was. Inosuke and Zenitsu, for their part, managed to defend their cores unconsciously. With Nezuko's help, Tanjiro managed to break free from the dream after cutting off his own head within it. He then cut the ropes that allowed the young people to invade the Slayer's dreams. Tanjiro discovered that the young people were sick and had only participated in the dream invasion in exchange for Enmu's promise that they would have a peaceful dream. Tanjiro apologized to the young people and detained them. He then asked Nezuko to wake the other Slayers while he went in search of the demon responsible. When he found Enmu, Tanjiro was angered to discover he had been tormenting people with cruel nightmares. The battle between them was intense, and Enmu was excited to have found Tanjiro, as he believed that if he could kill him, he would receive more of Muzan's blood. During the fight, Tanjiro was repeatedly placed into nightmares, but each time he cut off his own head to wake up, Enmu observed that such behavior was insane. After Tanjiro managed to cut off Enmu's head, it was revealed that the demon had fused with the entire train while Tanjiro was dreaming. After Nezuko managed to wake Inosuke, Tanjiro ordered him to protect the passengers, while he himself searched for the demon's head. Nezuko also helped defend some passengers, but was cornered by the demon. Even unconscious, Zenitsu managed to save Nezuko after all. Since when does Zenitsu need to be conscious to attack or defend someone? While sleeping, he is even more efficient. As the battle progressed, Rengoku woke up and informed Tanjiro that he would protect 5 of the 8 cars, while Zenitsu and Nezuko would be responsible for the others. Tanjiro and Inosuke were tasked with finding the demon's head. While Tanjiro and Inosuke searched for Enmu's head, Inosuke praised Rengoku for his tremendous skill, recognizing how exceptional he was. As the pair advanced, Tanjiro used his keen sense of smell to find Enmu's head, and Inosuke, with his exceptional swordsmanship, cut open the compartment where the demon's head still remained. During Tanjiro's attempt to cut off Enmu's head, he was placed into a nightmare, but managed to escape quickly by cutting off his own head within the dream. Inosuke did not fall into the nightmare due to his mask, which hampered Enmu's ability. Tanjiro and Inosuke synchronized their breathing and finally managed to cut off the demon's head. However, Tanjiro was wounded by the train engineer, who was being controlled by Enmu. The train, which had already been under Enmu's manipulation, veered east, sending Tanjiro and Inosuke flying into the air. Even wounded by the engineer, Tanjiro worried about him and asked Inosuke to help him. While Tanjiro recovered, Enmu lamented his defeat until he disintegrated completely. After Rengoku confirmed that Tanjiro was alright, they sensed the presence of someone approaching. None other than Akaza, the demon of upper rank 3. Akaza attempted to convince Rengoku to become a demon due to his incredible strength and power, but Rengoku, with his unshakable sense of justice, refused. An intense battle then began between Rengoku and Akaza, with Tanjiro and Inosuke wounded. They could only watch the spectacle of speed and raw power of the fight between Rengoku and Akaza, without being able to do much. The fight progressed, and with each passing moment, we watched Akaza deliver powerful blows that left Rengoku gravely wounded. But Rengoku did not yield. With his unyielding fighting spirit, Rengoku advanced once more against Akaza and, after delivering his final blow, a thought crossed his mind, bringing back memories of his mother. With that brief flashback, he delivered an epic line: "None of these boys will die." And with great conviction, Rengoku delivered his final blow. Akaza's fist was buried in Rengoku's body, while the flame pillar had his sword embedded in Akaza's neck, and both stood still, each pressing to end the battle. At that moment, Tanjiro searched for his sword and asked Inosuke to attack Akaza, since he himself could not move. The true danger, however, was not Rengoku, nor Inosuke, nor Tanjiro, but the sun that was rising. Akaza was forced to tear off his own arms and flee. Tanjiro attempted to kill him by throwing his sword to impale him, and screamed helplessly, calling him a coward for fleeing combat. After Akaza's escape, Rengoku spoke his last words to Tanjiro. Rengoku mentioned something he had recalled in his dreams and asked Tanjiro to go to his family home, as there should be notes left by the previous Flame Hashira that might contain a record of the Hinokami Kagura that Tanjiro was searching for. Before dying, Rengoku said to Tanjiro, "No matter how devastated you may feel by your own weakness or uselessness, set your heart ablaze." Then Kyujiro Rengoku, the flame pillar, saw the spirit of his mother and asked whether what he had done was right. His mother replied that she was proud of him, and Rengoku then died with a smile on his face. Rengoku was someone so kind and who radiated so much confidence. Rengoku's death made everyone cry, including his messenger crow. This death was one of the most impactful and one that left me deeply emotional when I watched it. After news of the Flame Pillar's death, everyone was saddened, and after some time, Tanjiro decided to visit the Rengoku family mansion. A boy is shown who appears to be a prodigy, intelligent and well-mannered, being raised by a wealthy family. An important detail is that everyone commented that the boy's skin condition prevented him from going out in sunlight, meaning we already know where this is headed and who this boy is. In the room, the boy was studying when suddenly Akaza, upper rank 3, appeared and bowed before him. It was then revealed that the boy was Muzan. In a different form, Akaza reported that he had not succeeded in his mission, and Muzan began to punish him. Akaza tried to improve his situation by saying he had defeated a Hashira, but this did not help, and Muzan delivered several blows against him. Muzan said that defeating Hashira would be the bare minimum expected of a demon, and grew even more furious, saying that Akaza had been hit by someone who was not even a Hashira, a common person. After all that humiliation before his master, Akaza left the location and swore he would put an end to Tanjiro Kamado. The young Slayers were still recovering at the Butterfly Estate, and everyone was saddened by Rengoku's death, but Tanjiro refused to be shaken. Even still healing from his injuries, he went to the mansion of Kyojuro Rengoku's family, following the Pillar's Crow. Arriving there, he found Senjuro, Kyojuro Rengoku's brother, who, even while grieving his brother's death, grew concerned about Tanjiro's injuries. At the entrance of the house was Kyojuro Rengoku's father, Shinjuro, drunk and uttering harsh words against his late son, saying he had died because he was worthless and had no talent. Tanjiro, upon hearing these harsh words, said he would not stand there and listen to that. Then, upon noticing Tanjiro's earrings, Shinjuro lunged at him and pinned him down. Senjuro tried to stop his father, but was slapped in the face. Tanjiro then managed to escape and confronted Kyojuro Rengoku's father. Shinjuro said Tanjiro had come only to mock them, since Tanjiro was a user of Breath of the Sun, powerful of all. Tanjiro had no idea what he was talking about, but said he had not come to mock them. Then, furious at everything he had heard about the Flame Pillar, Tanjiro came at him, not knowing his opponent was the former Flame Pillar. Tanjiro took quite a beating, but even so refused to give up and delivered his famous headbutt, which knocked out the drunken old man. Senjuro spoke with Tanjiro and thanked him for defending his brother's memory. He then decided to give Tanjiro the Flame Pillar's book, but when they opened it, the book was completely torn to pieces. Tanjiro made peace with it, saying it didn't matter and that he would have to train hard, as there would be no shortcuts. Tanjiro was determined to become as strong as Rengoku. Senjuro said he should be his brother's successor, but acknowledged that he didn't have the strength, since his sword had never changed color. He then decided he would help people in other ways. Senjuro was saddened to be ending a great lineage of Flame Hashira. Tanjiro then told Senjuro to follow the path his heart dictated, just as Kyojuro Rengoku had said to Tanjiro. Tanjiro and Senjuro said their farewells, and Senjuro handed Tanjiro the sword guard that Kyojuro Rengoku had kept for him. After that, Senjuro spoke with his father and realized that, even while drunk, Shinjuro was deeply feeling the loss of his son, and that everything he had shown was a way of easing his grief. Returning to the Butterfly Estate, Tanjiro encountered Hotaru Haganazuka, the swordsmith who forged his swords. However, Haganazuka was furious with Tanjiro, as he had lost his sword in the last fight. The swordsmith chased him around the estate, and Tanjiro ran for his life, in a rather comical scene. Back at the estate, the boys were fed, and the following day they began their intense training, doing push-ups with the girls on top of them. There is then a time skip. Months of intense training had passed, and the results showed everyone had grown stronger. This training was only interrupted when they were summoned to a mission. Tanjiro was summoned for a mission, and when they found the demon, Nezuko came out of the box and helped Tanjiro fight. The duo proved themselves very powerful and defeated the demon with relative ease, something very different from what had been the case months before. When he returns to the estate, a curious figure appears, Tengen Uzui, the Sound Pillar. He is forcibly taking two girls from the estate. The other girls try to stop him, so Tanjiro, seeing the scene, becomes furious and asks what is happening there, then immediately goes after Uzui, trying to headbutt him. Tanjiro doesn't back down for anyone, not even a pillar. However, the pillar easily dodges Tanjiro's attack, and after escaping, boasts that he is a former ninja, that he possesses incredible speed, and that he could never be hit by Tanjiro. Tanjiro then explains that he needs 2 girls for his new mission, and says it won't be a problem, since he isn't taking any of Shinobu Kocho's substitutes. Tanjiro then offers to go in the girls' place and help Tengen on the mission. Inosuke and Zenitsu then appear. Tengen agrees, but says it has to be done his way, and that he will not accept being challenged by the 3 boys. After this, Tengen explains where they are going and what the mission is, to go to the entertainment district. He gives a rather strange presentation, calling himself the God of Flamboyance, a rather peculiar title. He then dashes ahead of everyone at incredible speed, and the 3 try to keep up with him, but it proves difficult. Arriving at the entertainment district, they see many lights and beautiful things, yet behind such a beautiful place, strange things are hidden. Zenitsu, shameless as he is thrilled by the girls of the district calling out to him, but the sound Hashira quickly puts a damper on Zenitsu's excitement. The Hashira explains that the district only operates at night, making it the ideal place for demons, and says that the women who worked there were poor people who had been sold, receiving shelter in exchange for their services. Depending on their luck, some wealthy person might buy their freedom. The Hashira then outlines the mission. While he searches for the demons, the 3 should search for his wife. Zenitsu becomes completely distraught and starts shouting, saying the 3 were brought along only to find a wife for Uzui, and adds that a strange guy like him could never find a wife. Uzui then explains that his wife was infiltrating the district and sending information, but at a certain point she stopped sending news. Uzui shows an enormous pile of letters and explains that there are so many because he has 3 wives. Zenitsu, upon hearing this, becomes beside himself with envy. Uzui explains that his wives have already investigated most of the establishments, but 3 remain, and for that reason Zenitsu, Tanjiro, and Inosuke should investigate those 3 establishments. Uzui has an elaborate plan to accomplish the mission. Disguise the 3 as girls, albeit with rather strange makeup. Uzui offers them to some establishments, promising that his girls would be helpful, and makes considerable effort to place them free of charge. While they were walking around, a woman surrounded by a crowd makes her way to work. She holds a high rank in the local hierarchy. Then the owner of one of the establishments comes across Inosuke and says her eyes don't deceive her when she sees a promising girl, and takes Inosuke with her. She removes all the makeup and, after seeing Inosuke's face, says she will make a great deal of money from him. Zenitsu goes to another establishment, and although he is not blessed with good looks, he can play the shamisen very well, so thanks to his musical abilities, he is accepted free of charge at this establishment. Tanjiro proves effective due to his strength and overhears 2 girls talking, saying they were frightened because many girls were disappearing, and also commenting on the death of a woman at one of the establishments who had fallen from a window. Tanjiro asks about the disappearance of Suma to a woman who had come to the room where they were. The woman becomes somewhat concerned by the question, so Tanjiro, noticing this, says that Suma is his sister and that the 2 communicate regularly, trying to lie to maintain cover. However, the atmosphere becomes tense and Koinatsu says she had run away but left her diary behind. Tanjiro grows worried, as that story of running away is rather convenient when girls are being killed or devoured by demons. Tengen, observing the district, wonders where the demons are, since he senses no one's presence. He then deduces that there is a superior demon there. Inosuke at the establishment overhears gossip about Makio, one of Tengen's wives. The other women say that Makio is locked in a room, sick and refusing help. Then the scene cuts to show Makio being surprised by a demon, who asks to whom she had been sending all those letters. In a flashback, the owner of one of the establishments invades an Iran's room. The woman accuses the Iran of being involved in the disappearance of one of the girls, and the Iran smiles. Suddenly she appears, coming out of the room alone. The demon senses Inosuke approaching and squeezes Makio even harder to make her reveal information. When Inosuke arrives at the room, he sees nothing but is not convinced, as he can hear sounds. He then realizes the demon is in the attic and begins chasing the demon through the house. Zenitsu, meanwhile, using his keen hearing, hears a girl crying. Suddenly, an Oiran appears, and using his hearing, he perceives that the Oiran is not a real person but a demon. Due to a specific sound she emits, he wonders if she is an upper rank. During the conversation, the Oiran begins pulling the girl's ear with excessive force. Zenitsu, seeing the scene, decides to react and grabs the demon's arm, ordering the Oiran to take her hand off the girl. Tanjiro, for his part, continues working hard at his establishment, cleaning. The scene returns to the flashback explaining what happened between the woman and the Oiran. The woman cornered the Oiran against the wall, saying she had gone too far. The woman mentions remembering a story about a very beautiful but malicious Oiran who, when crossed, would react in an extremely aggressive manner. The woman is holding a knife, as she already knows her companion's intentions. Then Daki uses her sashes, reveals herself as a demon, climbs to the top of the house, and hurls the woman to the ground, saying beforehand that she would not eat such dry and old flesh. Returning to the room, Daki comes face to face with Muzan waiting for her. Muzan says she has grown stronger, but warns her not to be so careless in her hunger for power, so as not to draw the attention of the demon slayers and thus bring about her own end. Muzan continues to praise her, saying she was the most beautiful, and orders her to keep it up. After all, she had already sent 7 pillars to their doom, and had the potential to rise in the demon's hierarchy. The scene returns to the confrontation between Zenitsu and the Oiran. She delivers a powerful punch to Zenitsu, but suddenly the master of the establishment arrives and apologizes for his behavior. The demoness then resumes the appearance of a normal girl and responds calmly, saying she may have been too harsh on the newcomer. Zenitsu loses consciousness and she leaves the location, suspecting he might be a demon hunter. After this, Zenitsu is treated, and when he wakes up, he is alone in the room, when suddenly Daki's sashes wrap around him in a declared attack. The master of the establishment is informed that Zenitsu has disappeared, and wanting no more trouble, says he vanished because he had irritated Warabihime. It becomes clear that the master is very worried about the situation. Tanjiro and Inosuke talk, and Inosuke says there is a demon in his establishment. Tanjiro appears and informs them that Zenitsu will not be coming as he has disappeared. Uzui realizes the mission is becoming more complicated and tells them to fall back, stating he will continue the mission alone. The boys decide to stay, and throughout the night they search for the missing people and for Tanjiro Uzui's wives. Tanjiro reveals his true identity and leaves an envelope of money for his time at the establishment. The woman says she is glad that demon slayers are investigating the situation, and adds that she intends to flee with the person she loves. However, after Tanjiro leaves the room, Daki appears and says she will make use of her right now, since she will be fleeing the next day. Tanjiro goes to meet Inosuke, but along the way picks up the scent of a demon. Meanwhile, Inosuke, tired of waiting, retrieves his swords with the help of Tengen's trained rats. Tengen forces the master of the brothel to say where Zenitsu and his wife are. The master informs him that Zenitsu disappeared and that Tengen's wife had fallen ill and been sent to a lower class establishment. Tengen asks for more information, promising protection and revenge in exchange. Then, despite his fear, the master reveals the name Warabihime. Tanjiro arrives and finds Daki attacking the Oiran. Daki asks where the Hashira is, but by the time Tanjiro arrived, she had already consumed the woman completely. Tanjiro receives a very powerful blow and is sent flying. As he falls, he freezes upon realizing he is facing an upper-ranked demon. Tanjiro analyzes the entire situation and gets a rough understanding of how Daki's sashes work. Daki then announces she will devour Tanjiro. The strap of the box where Nezuko is breaks, so Tanjiro sets it down on the ground. The two launch into the attack. Tanjiro manages to cut one of the sashes and notices the face of one of the captured women within it. Even though Daki is very powerful, Tanjiro initially demonstrates a degree of resistance and versatility. Tengen then finds his wife bound by Daki's sashes, badly wounded. She says she found out who the true demon is. She had strategically consumed poison in order to be able to leave the establishment, but then Daki launched a sash that constantly kept watch over her, and that sash attacked her. Tengen thanks her for her work, gives her the antidote, and tells her to flee the district as soon as she recovers. He then sets off toward the hunt and, using his keen hearing, perceives that there is a fight underground. Tanjiro grows worried, as the battle has barely begun, and his sword is already damaged. He then realizes that water breathing is not suited for him, and that the Hinokami Kagura would be more effective. However, he knows his body cannot withstand many blows with that technique, but decides to try as this is the crucial moment. He then delivers strikes that manage to cut Daki's sashes using the Hinokami Kagura. During the confrontation, it appeared that Tanjiro had taken a fatal blow, but he managed to escape and finds an opening to attack Daki. However, his strike was not effective, as she quickly closed the gap and counters Tanjiro. As he falls to the ground, he feels the exhaustion caused by the Hinokami Kagura. At that moment, Daki senses an opening and attacks with everything she has. But Tanjiro manages to react and escape the blow. The two resume the confrontation, and even spotting several openings, Tanjiro cannot land a single one of them. Inosuke begins his search, notices a hole, and begins crawling through it after dislocating his limbs, like an earthworm. He then finds the location where there are many of Daki's sashes and notices several people trapped within them, including Zenitsu. Suddenly, a piece of sash grows eyes and a mouth and begins attacking Inosuke, who then begins slicing through the sashes. The sash then receives instructions from Daki. It could devour people to grow stronger, as long as it left the 10 most beautiful people for Daki. The situation becomes complicated, as Inosuke must attack the sash while simultaneously protecting the people he has freed. But then reinforcements arrive. Tengen's wives arrive at the location. Suma and Makio join the fight. Zenitsu, somewhat dazed, appears and cuts the sash into many pieces. A sound then occurs, and who appears is Tengen, who arrives already demonstrating his flamboyance by cutting the sash into many pieces with a single blow. A flashback of Uzui with his 3 wives is shown, in which he makes clear that the 3 are very important to him, that they should not die, and that he fought against the ninja ideology, yet found it fair, having abandoned such ideology. The battle between Tanjiro and Daki, upper rank 6, grows increasingly intense, with Tanjiro trying to hold firm against the demon's rapid attacks. When Daki recovers her sashes, previously cut by Uzui, she transforms, gains more power, and her hair turns white. She celebrates upon realizing there is a Hashira among the Slayers and sees the chance to prove her worth to Muzan. A civilian dares to complain about the chaos, and without mercy, Daki attacks him, destroying everything around with a devastating blow. Tanjiro tries to protect the people, but is gravely wounded in the shoulder. Many civilians die in the attack. Buildings are destroyed, and the ground is torn apart. Daki revels in all of it, but Tanjiro, seized by intense rage, swears to prevent her from causing further destruction. In a moment of reflection, Tanjiro recalls a letter from Shinjiro, Rengoku's father, who apologizes for his rude behavior in the past and praises Tanjiro for his consideration toward his son. Shinjiro reveals that he recognizes Rengoku's worth as a Hashira, and that Tanjiro, owing to the mark on his forehead, could be a user of sun breathing. Tanjiro, however, denies having been born with the mark, believing he acquired it after injuring himself while protecting his brother. But this detail does not matter, as his rage at Daki's injustice is immense. As Tanjiro advances to attack Daki, she tries to escape, but Tanjiro pursues her and cuts one of her legs, forcing her to regenerate. He questions the demon about why she and the other demons killed defenseless humans, which stirs a distant memory in Daki connected to Muzan, her master. Meanwhile, Uzui, Inosuke, and Zenitsu approach the battle, while Daki dismisses the memories of her human life, and reasserts that, as a demon, she need not worry about illness or death. Confident, she uses her blood demon art to attack Tanjiro with a series of sashes, but he cuts through them with his flame spiral technique, surprising Daki by slowing her regeneration. The battle grows fiercer and fiercer, with Daki increasing the number of sashes to 13, but Tanjiro, now more focused, manages to see the demon's movements with clarity and defend himself with precision. In an impressive move, he pins Daki's sashes to the ground and prepares to attack her neck. But before delivering the final blow, Tanjiro has a vision of his sister that reminds him to breathe. Exhaustion overcomes him and he collapses to the ground breathless. Daki seizes the opportunity to attack Tanjiro, but is interrupted by Nezuko, who appears in a fury and violently kicks Daki's head, nearly tearing it off. The sight of her wounded brother awakens in Nezuko, memories of her family being slaughtered, making her even more enraged. Daki recognizes Nezuko as the demon Muzan ordered to be eliminated. Even so, Daki attacks and gravely wounds Nezuko, cutting her leg, arm, and torso. But to everyone's surprise, Nezuko regenerates almost instantaneously. Her regeneration is at the level of a superior demon, shocking Daki. Nezuko transforms, breaking the bamboo she was biting and growing in power, with horns emerging from her head and markings spreading across her body. The atmosphere shifts dramatically, and Daki begins to feel intimidated. Nezuko attacks with fury, but even with her limbs repeatedly cut by Daki, she regenerates almost instantaneously and continues the fight, pressing the upper rank. While Tanjiro is unconscious, he dreams of his brother Takeo, who reflects on how Tanjiro and Nezuko were gentle, but terrifying when angered. Back in the battle, Nezuko advances on Daki again at full force, demonstrating that the fight is far from over. Hearing his brother's voice, Tanjiro receives instructions asking him to wake up and help Nezuko before she loses control. Daki finally retaliates with her sashes, attacking with force and cutting Nezuko's neck. Even dismembered, Nezuko surprises everyone by grabbing Daki's sashes, freezing her own blood, and setting the upper rank on fire with a new technique. Nezuko's fire, which only affects demons, hinders Daki's regeneration, and she recalls a trauma from her childhood as she is burned alive. Nezuko regenerates and, with extreme speed, attacks Daki again, sending her flying. However, upon seeing a wounded woman, Nezuko loses control and attempts to attack her. Tanjiro arrives in time to stop his sister by using his sword as a muzzle. While Nezuko struggles and tries to break free, completely out of control, Daki returns furious and burned, complaining about the difficulty of regenerating caused by Nezuko's flames. Before she could attack, Tengen, the sound pillar, appears and cuts through Daki's sashes, quickly decapitating the upper rank. Before anyone notices, Daki, still alive, throws a tantrum crying like a child, insisting she is still a powerful upper rank demon. Uzuri watches in surprise that Daki is not disintegrating, even after being decapitated. It is then that something sinister happens. From Daki's body emerges her brother Gyutaro, who immediately heals her burns. Uzui, wasting no time, attacks Gyutaro, but the new demon is fast and counters him, inflicting a cut on the Hashira's head. Gyutaro, filled with envy toward Uzei's appearance and abilities, makes biting comments about the pillar's dark future. A fierce battle begins, with Gyutaro hurling his scythes charged with his blood demon art, called Rotating Corpse Detachment, forcing Uzei to act quickly to defend himself. Inosuke and Zenitsu finally arrive at the scene and prepare to help Uzui, while Tenjiro takes Nezuko to a safe location. The fight grows increasingly intense, and Uzui begins to suspect that Daki can only be defeated if her brother Gyutaro is also decapitated, suggesting the two share the same body. Using his abilities, Uzui attempts to destroy the building where they are fighting to create an advantage, but the demon siblings prove relentless, revealing that they are two entities in one, making the battle even more challenging for the Sound Pillar and his allies. With great precision, Uzui cuts Gyutaro's neck. Daki, decapitated once more, panics, but Gyutaro warns that the battle will be decided slowly due to the poison weakening Uzui. At that moment, Inosuke, Zenitsu, and Tanjiro arrive to help the Hashira. The district is evacuated, and civilians flee guided by Makio and Suma, while Hinatsuru, one of Uzui's wives, recovers and escapes her captivity. The fellow Slayers prepare for the battle. Tanjiro realizes that Tengen is poisoned when Daki taunts that the Slayers have no chance of victory without the Hashira. However, Tengen remains confident, asserting that the three Slayers are his successors. Uzui reveals he has figured out how to defeat the demons. They must be decapitated simultaneously. While Gyutaro attacks Tanjiro, Uzui takes the lead in the fight. Daki and Gyutaro synchronize their attacks, trying to separate the Slayers. Zenitsu and Inosuke fight against Daki, who reveals her true power using her sashes, launching countless attacks and making it difficult for the Slayers to defend. During the intense battle, Uzui uses his explosives to defend himself, but Gyutaro attacks him ferociously with his blood sickles. When Gyutaro attacks with those sickles, Tanjiro uses the flexibility of water breathing to evade. Uzui uses sound breathing, fifth form, roar, launching explosions that destroy Gyutaro's sickles and push him out of the building. Daki tries to help her brother, but Tanjiro intercepts her attack, pinning her sashes to the ground. Uzui realizes that Tanjiro is gravely wounded and that time is running out due to the poison coursing through his body. Hinatsuru appears on the rooftop and launches a volley of wisteria-poisoned kunai toward Gyutaro. The demon tries to defend himself by creating a barrier of sickles, but is struck by one of the kunai, which slows his regeneration. Seizing the moment, Uzui cuts Gyutaro's legs while Tanjiro rushes forward to decapitate him. A flashback of Uzui and his wives visiting the tombstones of the Pillar's family is shown. From that moment, Uzui vows to live flamboyantly in honor of his brothers. Back in the battle, Tanjiro and Uzui attack Gyutaro, but soon discover that the poison only affects upper ranks for a short period. Even weakened, Gyutaro uses his power to push the Slayers back with his blood sickles. Uzui responds with sound breathing, fourth form, delivering multiple strikes that dissipate Gyutaro's attack. Meanwhile, Daki tries to attack Uzui, but Hinatsuru intervenes to distract Daki's sashes until she is captured by Gyutaro. Uzui, desperate, tries to save his wife, but is held back by Daki. At that moment, a flashback shows Hinatsuru suggesting that, after defeating an upper rank, they should retire and live a normal life, away from battles. Uzui manages to break free from Daki's sashes and orders Gyutaro to let Hinatsuru go. Tanjiro, hearing the screams, decides to act even knowing his body is exhausted. He combines water breathing with the Hinokami Kagura, and in a swift attack, cuts off Gyutaro's hand, saving Hinatsuru. Tanjiro reflects on how combining the breathing styles could be the key to reaching maximum power, a lesson taught by Urokodaki. Gyutaro tries to finish off Tanjiro, but Uzui appears to protect him and hurls his sword at the demon's neck. Meanwhile, Inosuke and Zenitsu are still facing Daki's sashes. Zenitsu explains that the demons' heads don't need to be cut at exactly the same instant, but it is necessary to ensure that one does not reattach to its body before the other is cut. Tanjiro and Uzui combine an attack against Gyutaro, but their swords become caught in the demon's scythes, who uses his head to block the blows. Gyutaro and Uzui fall together during the battle, with Tanjiro trying to help but being repelled by Gyutaro's blood sickles. Meanwhile, the battle with Daki continues, and Tanjiro joins Inosuke and Zenitsu. They realize that Daki is weaker than Gyutaro, and decide to focus on cutting her head off first. Tanjiro uses water breathing to defend against Daki's sashes while Hinatsuru withdraws from the battlefield. Inosuke, Zenitsu, and Tanjiro work together to face Daki. Inosuke uses beast breathing 8th form to advance toward the demon. In a beautiful scene, the three synchronize their attacks. Tanjiro uses water breathing and Zenitsu uses thunder breathing, while both protect Inosuke. Despite suffering some cuts, Inosuke finally manages to decapitate Daki. However, Gyutaro appears by surprise, stabs Inosuke in the chest, and recovers his sister's head. Tanjiro is devastated to see his friend gravely wounded and poisoned, and also realizes that Uzui has been gravely wounded as well, with one of his hands severed. Before he can react, Zenitsu saves Tanjiro from a massive attack by Daki's sashes, which tears apart the ground and surrounding buildings in a devastating strike. Tanjiro, now in shock, blames himself for getting distracted and for nearly losing everything. He then encounters Gyutaro, who proposes an insane partnership. Tanjiro hesitates, and Gyutaro threatens to hurt Nezuko if he refuses. Feeling cornered and desperate, Daki attacks Tanjiro, who cannot defend himself because of his injuries. Gyutaro intervenes, and Tanjiro is taken aback when he suggests turning him into a demon. He initially rejects the idea, but then imagines what his life might have been like as a demon. Despite this, Tanjiro is determined to protect his sister, and uses the Hinokami Kagura to attack Gyutaro, feeling empathy toward him. Tanjiro and Zenitsu face Daki, but after 2 attacks, they can no longer move. Then Tengen appears and saves Tanjiro. This appearance by Uzui is tremendously impactful, as he is completely poisoned yet continues to fight. So much so that Gyutaro cannot believe Uzui is still alive, even without an arm and completely poisoned. Uzui then reveals that he forced his heart to stop beating, causing the poison to spread more slowly. Uzui says the score is complete and heads toward Gyutaro. Now he could see all of the demon's attacks and movements as though he were reading sheet music. The scene is very emotional, with extremely fast strikes being delivered. The fight extends through several of Tengen's explosions and several of Gyutaro's blood attacks. Meanwhile, Tanjiro tries to keep up and find an opening, but Gyutaro finds one first and attacks Uzui's eye. Tanjiro seizes the opportunity and rushes toward Gyutaro, while Uzui drives his sword into the demon's stomach. Gyutaro delivers a blow to Tanjiro's jaw that pierces through it, but then Tanjiro seizes the moment and decapitates Gyutaro. Midway through the cut, however, he lacks the strength to finish. Then his scars intensify, increasing his power, and Tanjiro takes on a far more menacing appearance, demonstrating that he has become more powerful. With that, he finds the strength to cut completely through Gyutaro's head. However, Gyutaro remains calm because he knows he cannot die while his sister is still alive. At that moment, Daki is fighting against Zenitsu, when suddenly Inosuke appears in a surprise attack, saying that dislocating his organs is a trivial matter for him. The two then attack Daki's neck. At the same time, Tanjiro and Tengen decapitate Gyutaro, while Zenitsu and Inosuke decapitate Daki. The heads of the two roll to a nearby place, facing each other. Tanjiro, lying on the ground unable to breathe, his body severely weakened and the poison coursing through his system, grows worried. But then Tengen shouts for everyone to flee, as the battle is not yet over. Suddenly, an explosion caused by Gyutaro occurs, devastating the entire nearby area. Nezuko quickly uses her blood demon art to burn the sickles threatening her friends, saving them from a lethal attack. Tanjiro regains consciousness and realizes the poison's effect has ceased, although he can barely stay on his feet. Nezuko carries her brother on her back as they head towards Zenitsu, who warns of Inosuke's critical condition, unconscious due to the poison and his injuries. Desperate, Tanjiro considers asking Shinobu for help, but has no time to waste. Nezuko then takes the initiative and uses her blazing tongue to burn the poison in Inosuke's body, awakening him and bringing relief to everyone. Meanwhile, Uzui's wives are beside themselves with despair upon realizing they cannot neutralize the poison affecting the Hashira with the antidote they have. Aware of his condition, Uzui tries to speak his final words, but Nezuko approaches and, just as she did with Inosuke, burns the poison out of him. Everyone is relieved. Tanjiro decides to confirm the demon's deaths and goes in search of the heads, accompanied by Nezuko, where he finds a pool of blood from one of the upper ranks and collects a sample. He then comes upon Daki and Gyutaro arguing, each blaming the other for the defeat. Daki insults Gyutaro, calling him a freak and asserting he could never truly be her brother, while Gyutaro retorts, reminding her that Daki would not have survived without him. Tanjiro runs to the demons and tries to get them to make peace, reminding them that in the end, they only have each other and that they will be remembered with hatred for their actions. Daki ends up disintegrating while Gyutaro reflects on his past. He remembers the life of poverty he endured, the contempt he suffered, and the love he felt for his sister named Ume. When Ume was brutally murdered by a samurai, Gyutaro erupts in anger and ends up killing the one responsible. Afterward, Doma, a demon who was upper rank 6 at the time, offers his blood to Gyutaro and Ume, turning them into demons. Gyutaro expresses that he does not regret his choice, but laments Ume's fate, feeling she could have had a different life. In the void he believes to be hell, he is reunited with Ume, who apologizes for the insults she had made. Though Gyutaro wants to go their separate ways, Ume clings to him, reaffirming her desire for them to remain together. Tanjiro and Nezuko watch the siblings' disintegration and wonder whether they manage to make peace. The Serpent Pillar, Obanai Iguro, arrives at the district and makes a sarcastic comment about Uzui, congratulating him on defeating upper rank 6, though noting that Uzui is in terrible shape. Uzui replies that, despite having lost an arm and an eye, he can still help, especially now that young slayers are in danger. The victory is celebrated by Ubayashiki, who even in his weakened state celebrates the fact that it was the first time in 100 years that an upper rank had been defeated. The Corps is convened to discuss everything that happened. Uzui and his wives celebrate the triumphant return of the 4 survivors, while Tanjiro reunites with his friends and Nezuko, thanking everyone for having managed to survive the intense battle. Akaza, one of the high-ranking demons, is approached by another superior demon who mentions Gyutaro's death. Hantengu, present in the conversation, says it has been 113 years since the demons were last convened. Akaza, indifferent to the conversation, questions when Muzan, the demon's leader, will arrive. Doma, another superior member, tries to distract Akaza by expressing concern for his well-being. The interaction quickly grows tense, resulting in a physical confrontation between Akaza and Doma. The situation escalates when Kokushibo, another high-ranking demon, advises everyone to focus on cooperation among demons. At the meeting, Muzan passes instructions to each upper rank on how they should act from now on. A plan to eliminate all enemies and find the blue wisteria flower. Muzan is furious because it has already been 113 years since an upper rank, Gyutaro, was defeated. In Doma's room, a subordinate informs him that the people who worship him have arrived, and Doma then puts on his hat as though it were a sacred artifact. The scene then shifts to a hut, where a man holds a baby while a woman appears to be in distress. The baby's father arrives, and he is identical to Tanjiro. After a brief exchange, the man accompanying him says he must depart, as it is not right to accept hospitality without giving something in return. The baby's father asks him to leave his name as a legacy, stating that if not for him, they would not be there. The man replies that it is not necessary, for if it is fate, they will meet again. He also mentions that he may yet find that special swordsman, but that he failed to protect what was important to him. The scene cuts to Tanjiro waking up in a hospital crying because of that dream, and it is revealed that he had been in a coma for 2 months following the battle. The man who found him comes to Tanjiro's room with cake, surprised to discover he had woken up and that Kanao had not informed anyone. Everyone is happy about Tanjiro's return, but he is worried about the state of his friends. He learns that Zenitsu woke up the following day, while the Sound Pillar quietly departed with his wives. Inosuke, who had been on the brink of death due to the poison, is now well and hanging from the ceiling above Tanjiro. Proud of having woken up a week earlier, he begins arguing with the others, but Kanao asks them to be quiet, as Tanjiro had fallen back asleep. A week later, Tanjiro is already recovering. Inosuke, who recovered first, begins going about his affairs, while Zenitsu is causing trouble for the team he was placed with. Tanjiro, focused on recovering, thinks of his sword and reads the letters he received from the swordsmith, which bring bad news. He refuses to make another sword for Tanjiro. The girls suggest he go to the swordsmith village, where he could get a new sword. Tanjiro accepts the proposal and the guide comes to fetch him. Since the village is a secret, he must wear a blindfold and earplugs, as well as a nose plug, given his keen sense of smell. The guide takes him on a journey where he switches companions several times due to the highly secret nature of the swordsmith's base, essential to the Slayers, as it is their swords that allow them to defeat demons. Upon arriving at the village, the blindfold is removed and Tanjiro is surprised by the beauty of the place, which had a hot spring. He is told to go directly to the chief's home while refreshing himself in the spring. The love pillar overhears Tanjiro thanking his guide for the trip. At the chief's home, Tanjiro introduces himself to the leader and is received respectfully. The chief informs him that Haganezuka has gone missing because he is upset and mentions his difficult personality. Tanjiro admits that the fault for Haganezuka's irritation is his, as he was the one who damaged the sword. However, the chief defends Haganezuka, claiming he had forged a flawed sword, and promises to teach Tanjiro a few things when Haganezuka returns. Tanjiro was instructed to rest in the village springs, famous for revitalizing tired bodies. It was told to Tanjiro that should Haganezuka not return before his body was ready to hunt demons again, another swordsmith would be assigned to forge his new sword. His guide, while presenting the springs and speaking of their benefits, was interrupted by Mitsuri Kanroji, the love pillar, who came running down the stairway. Her clothing could barely contain her, and as she tripped, Tanjiro quickly caught the fabric, preventing a more serious incident. Out of breath, Mitsuri explained that someone at the hot springs had ignored her, even knowing she was a Hashira. Tanjiro, with his customary kindness, steered the conversation in a different direction and mentioned the dinner menu, appealing to the pillar's voracious appetite. Then Tanjiro heads to the spring for a bath, and was almost immediately struck by something. Upon investigating, he discovered the culprit was Genya Shinazugawa, who angrily told Tanjiro to leave. Ignoring the hostility, Tanjiro removed his clothes and entered the bath, attempting to make conversation, but Genya nearly drowned him before storming off. At dinner, Tanjiro speaks with Mitsuri, who was devouring a mountain of dishes. He mentioned the difficult relationship between Genya and his brother Sanemi, the Wind Pillar. Tanjiro had hoped that Genya would join them for the meal, but discovered he had not eaten. Concerned, he decided to bring food to him, and Mitsuri offered to help. Along the way, Tanjiro asked Mitsuri why she had become a demon slayer. He was somewhat disappointed to find out that her only goal was to find her Prince Charming. Upon arriving at the location, they did not find Genya, and Mitsuri had to say goodbye as her sword was nearly ready. Before leaving, she wished Tanjiro good luck and praised him for having survived a battle against an upper rank. Tanjiro promised he would do his best until the day he could defeat Muzan. Mitsuri, in a more intimate gesture, whispered in Tanjiro's ear that there was a secret weapon in the village that could make him even stronger, urging him to seek it out. With such closeness, Tanjiro was visibly flustered. The following day, after his meditation training, he spoke with Nezuko about his desire to find the so-called secret weapon that promised to make him stronger. Determined, Tanjiro headed into the forest in search of the treasure. When he came across two people arguing, he recognized one of them as Muichiro Tokito, the Mist Pillar, and the other was a child he had seen in his dreams. The child was shouting at the Hashira, saying he would not hand over a key and that he should not use that thing. Tanjiro, watching from a distance, thought they were fighting and felt guilty for eavesdropping. However, if it proved necessary, he would intervene. When Muichiro struck the child, Tanjiro moved quickly to stop him, grabbing the Hashira's arm. To his surprise, Muichiro did not budge a single millimeter, even though he was slimmer and smaller than him. Irritated by the intrusion, Muichiro elbowed Tanjiro, calling him weak and saying it was a miracle he had made it into the Demon Slayer Corps. Surprised by Tanjiro's determination, Muichiro hesitated for a moment. Meanwhile, Tanjiro had already pulled the child away from the Hashira's grasp and was asking if he was alright. The boy, still insisting on the same subject, repeated that he would not hand over the key to the doll to anyone. Muichiro, impatient, began emphasizing the gravity of the situation, asserting that the boy's actions could cause the deaths of many people. Without wasting time, he ordered Tanjiro to stop wasting a Hashira's time. He asserted that the value of his time was infinitely greater than that of a mere swordsmith, who according to him could save no one, since all he knew how to do was forge swords. Furious at the Hashira's words, Tanjiro slapped his hand away and began to scold Muichiro for being insensitive and cruel. But the Mist Pillar, with little interest, cut Tanjiro's speech short and knocked him unconscious with extreme ease, as though it were nothing. After some time, another man appeared to help move Tanjiro from there, but upon realizing the boy was about to wake up, quickly fled. However, Tanjiro recognized his scent, though the boy beside him insisted there was no one there. Thanking Tanjiro for saving him, the boy confessed that he had ended up handing the key to Muichiro. He then explained to Tanjiro about the special doll, the Type 0, an ancestral creation that far surpassed human movements. While they were discussing the doll, they heard the sound of clashing swords and went to investigate. Upon arriving at the scene, Tanjiro was impressed to see the doll fighting as an equal with Muichiro. The doll had 6 arms, something that intrigued Tanjiro, who promptly asked why. The boy explained that the doll had been modeled after a legendary swordsman, and that, in order to replicate his movements, they needed to give the doll 6 arms. Tanjiro felt a sense of familiarity with that swordsman and asked who the person was that inspired it, but the boy did not know, as the man had lived in the Sengoku era more than 300 years ago. Due to the doll's advanced age, it was on the verge of breaking, and to make matters worse, no one in the swordsmith family had the skill to repair it. Tanjiro reflected on how Muichiro, who was the same age as him, had already reached the rank of Hashira and still faced such a difficult fight. At that moment, a long-lashed crow intervened, saying it was natural, since Muichiro was a genius descended from sun breathing. Tanjiro recognized sun breathing and found it remarkable, but commented that Muichiro was not using it. This caused the crow to have a meltdown. Tanjiro then recalled where he recognized Yoriichi. He had seen the swordsman in his dreams. However, the crow said he was out of his mind, and Tanjiro began to doubt himself. The boy Kotetsu told Tanjiro that it could be a genetic memory. Something in his village, they believed that memories were passed down through DNA. Tanjiro thought Kotetsu was only trying to console him, so he thanked him and let it go. While they were talking, Muichiro struck the doll hard, breaking parts of its armor. Kotetsu, unable to watch the doll being destroyed, fled, and Tanjiro went after him, finding him perched in a tree. Tanjiro tried to motivate him, saying he could not give up on his future, and that even if he could not repair the doll now, his descendants might be able to. He climbed the tree and with a flick to Kotetsu's forehead, said that giving up was not an option. Just as Tanjiro was fighting to defeat Muzan, this was only the beginning of a long journey. Inspired, Kotetsu agreed not to give up, and they decided to watch Muichiro Tokito's training together. However, before reaching the training grounds, they found Muichiro returning because his sword had broken. As a result, he took one of the doll's arms, which had a sword inside it. Desperate, Kotetsu ran ahead, and Muichiro, without ceremony, threw the sword in Tanjiro's direction, asking him to dispose of it. Tanjiro, though annoyed, sensed no malice in Muichiro's actions, but the crow continued to be arrogant and dismissive toward Tanjiro at every turn. Shortly after it began to rain, Tanjiro approached Kotetsu trying to comfort him and suggested reactivating the doll. To both their surprise, the doll came back to life and Kotetsu, full of anger, ordered Tanjiro to use it for training and one day defeat Muichiro Tokito. Tanjiro began training but could barely survive, and even with 5 arms functioning, the doll was stronger. Kotetsu was enthusiastic, encouraging Tanjiro while teaching him how he could humiliate Muichiro after defeating him. As the training progressed, Kotetsu proved to be a good trainer, noticing Tanjiro's errors and bad habits and helping him correct them. Even so, Tanjiro kept getting beaten, and with his hunger growing, he could only keep going because the doll was using training rods. Although Kotetsu was excellent at analyzing movements, he seemed to completely ignore the limits of the human body, and Tanjiro only survived thanks to the refreshing rain. Without food and exhausted, Tanjiro begins to feel on the verge of fainting, nearly crossing over to the other side. Even submerged in the water, he detected a distinct scent, analyzed the doll's movements, and with this newly heightened sense managed to anticipate the next attack, dodging it and striking the doll, even if weakly. Impressed by the progress, Kotetsu decided to reward him with food. In the next training session, Tanjiro continued using his sense of smell to predict where attacks would come from, using this ability to advance and almost hit the doll. However, he hesitated to deliver the final blow out of fear of breaking it. Then Kotetsu, without patience, told Tanjiro to land the final blow, promising he would find a way to repair the doll afterward. Following the advice, Tanjiro struck the doll and collapsed to the ground exhausted. To his surprise, the blow revealed something incredible. The doll's face broke apart, and inside it was another sword, forged more than 300 years ago. An argument broke out between Kotetsu and Tanjiro, with the boy insisting he keep the sword, while Tanjiro, embarrassed, refused. Eventually, Kotetsu convinced him to draw the sword from its scabbard, but to both their disappointment, it was rusted. At that moment, Haganezuka appeared, even more muscular and full of energy, declaring that he had heard their story, and that it was now his responsibility to take care of the sword. He took it from the boy's hands, but before he could leave, another adult from the village arrived and made Haganezuka faint by tickling his weak spot. This man explained that Haganezuka had isolated himself in the mountains to train and forge an even more powerful sword for Tanjiro, as he too had grown stronger. The man promised to take the old sword to be polished using a secret family technique, and in the meantime handed Tanjiro a new temporary sword. During dinner, Tanjiro was chatting with Genya, his fellow Slayer, who seemed on the verge of losing his patience. Tanjiro was being friendly, but Genya was blunt. They were not friends, especially after Tanjiro had once broken his arm. Tanjiro, however, argued that it only happened because Genya had tried to hit a girl. Furious, Genya shouted at Tanjiro, but he could not help noticing something strange. The tooth Genya had lost at the hot spring had already grown back. Curious, Tanjiro asked about it, leaving Genya flustered. Trying to brush it off, Genya said Tanjiro was seeing things, but Tanjiro revealed he still had the lost tooth, dismantling Genya's excuse, and Genya, irritated, threw him out. Later in the room, Tanjiro was playing with Mitsuri's hairstyle and reflecting on Genya's perpetually bad temper. Meanwhile, one of the village swordsmiths, walking past the staircase, found a strange pot. Curious, he approached to get a better look, but was pulled inside it. It was the 5th upper ranks pot, who soon appeared distorting the swordsmith's body, declaring that the human flesh there would not be suitable for consumption, but that it did not matter as he only needed to kill everyone. At the same time, the 4th upper rank was also there, and the two demons conspired to destroy everything, thereby weakening the demon slayers. In the dead of night, Genya went to a hut in search of someone. Tanjiro murmured to himself about having to act in secret from his own brother, the Wind Pillar. Meanwhile, in another room, Muichiro appeared calling for Tanjiro and asked if he had seen his new swordsmith, to which Tanjiro replied he was probably with Haganezuka. They decided to go out to look for him, and during the search, Muichiro asked Tanjiro why he always helped others. Tanjiro, with his generous heart, replied that everything we do for others eventually comes back to us. Muichiro was confused by the answer, but pressed on. While they were talking, both sensed a strange presence. Upon opening the door, they came face to face with upper rank 4. They froze for a moment, only realizing the gravity of the situation when the demon was right in front of them. Tanjiro quickly realized he was facing a high-ranking demon. Without hesitating, Muichiro drew his sword and activated Mist Breathing, 4th form. However, the demon dodged with agility and reappeared on the ceiling. Tanjiro knew he could not hesitate. The demon had already taken many lives, and only someone with extraordinary reflexes could dodge the attack of a Hashira. He then activated his technique, the Hinokami Kagura, striking the demon, which surprisingly did not react. Nezuko also transformed, ready to enter the battle, but Tanjiro implored her not to continue, fearing she might fully transform into a demon. Taking advantage of the distraction, Muichiro cut the demon's head off with his sword. Tanjiro, remembering that decapitating a high-ranking demon would not be enough to kill it, tried to warn Muichiro, but before he could react, the severed head began to split, and the demon multiplied, now into 2. Each of them went to attack the 2 slayers. The demon attacking Muichiro swung a large fan, sweeping both him and Tanjiro out of the room. Nezuko managed to catch Tanjiro before he was thrown. Muichiro was sent flying far away. Now before them were 2 demons, one expressing rage and the other with a strange happiness. The enraged demon wielded its staff, summoning lightning that struck Tanjiro, nearly causing him to lose consciousness. At that moment, Genya appeared on the rooftop wielding a double-barreled pistol. With a precise shot, he decapitated both demons simultaneously. Tanjiro, surprised, commented that Genya's weapon smelled like a Nichirin sword. Genya said he had missed one of the demons, drew his sword and advanced, but Tanjiro tried to warn him too late. The demon seemed not to care about losing its head, and rather than dying, continued splitting, creating more copies of itself. Tanjiro tried to identify a pattern or the speed of regeneration, but it was futile. By the time he realized, one of the demons had already captured him and was carrying him into the sky. Nezuko thought of going after Tanjiro, but he shouted for her to help Genya. However, when he looked again, he saw Genya being impaled by one of the demon's copies, which called him weak. Meanwhile, the other demon holding Tanjiro asked if he really had time to worry about others and then unleashed a sonic blast into his mouth. Tanjiro tried to use the Hinokami Kagura to counterattack, but was unable. Desperate, he cut the demon's leg, softening his fall into the trees below. Still disoriented by the noise, he noticed the demon was stuck to his feet, ready to release another sonic blast. In the meantime, Muichiro recovered, spotted Katetsu being attacked. Although his first instinct was to ignore it, as he believed only the strongest should be saved in emergency situations. He recalled Tanjiro's words about always helping others. Motivated by this thought, Muichiro decided to rescue Katetsu, cut the fish demon attacking the boy, and sent him fleeing, taking over the battle himself. However, the demon continued to fight, forcing Muichiro to use his keen perception to identify the weak point, a jar above the fish. By destroying it, he managed to defeat the demon. Muichiro concluded that the fish was merely a familiar of the stronger demon attacking the village. Upon killing the demon, Kotetsu ran to cling to the Hashira, despite having previously said he did not like him. Impatiently, Muichiro left him there, but Kotetsu asked him to save Haganazuka, who was working tirelessly on Tanjiro's sword and could not protect himself alone. Muichiro initially considered retreating, but recalled the words of the Demon Slayer Corps leader, who said that soon he would find clarity and the mist in his mind would clear. Determined to save Haganazuka, Muichiro put Kotetsu on his back and set off with the confidence that he could protect both the swordsmith and the village, for he was the Mist Hashira, recognized by his master. Meanwhile, Tamuchiro continued fighting one of the copies of Upper Rank 4. The demon, still stuck to his feet, was about to release another sonic blast, but Tamuchiro, acting quickly, cut the demon's head from its mouth to the other side. Yet his fear persisted, and each time he cut the demon, it multiplied into increasingly troublesome copies. Desperate, Tamuchiro thinks of his sister, who is facing 3 copies of the demon, alongside Genya. To his relief, Nezuko is holding her own. Nezuko was locked in an intense fight against the superior demon, while Genya remained impaled in the abdomen by the lance of the sorrow form. The copy of the pleasure form was toying with Nezuko, mocking her and saying she should try harder, while the rage copy ordered them to end it once and for all, dismembering her. The copies argued over who would have the pleasure of killing Nezuko first, while the sorrow form's lance remained embedded in Genya. Even in such a critical situation, Genya wakes up laughing and fires at the demon, blowing off its head. However, even without a head, the demon begins removing the lance from Genya's abdomen, who screams in pain before fainting due to blood loss. The demon quickly recovers its head and is puzzled by the fact that Genya is still alive, even after being impaled through a vital point. Genya, in critical condition, begins chanting a Buddhist prayer while pressing his hand against the wound, and the demons are confused and laugh, thinking he is merely a fanatic. However, the rage form notices he is still alive and orders the sorrow form to decapitate him. When it tries to carry out the order, it misses, and Genya appears behind the copy, determined to tear off its head as many times as necessary until it dies. But before he could complete the attack, the rage demon launches lightning at Genya, who cannot resist. Destabilized by the attack, Genya nonetheless manages to shoot and blow off one of the rage demon's hands. Destabilized, the demon loses control of its power and begins to question why Genya would not die. Seizing the moment, the sorrow form hurls Genya against one of the walls, sending him flying. The pleasure form, now free to act, decides to finish off Nezuko, piercing her with its feet. It suggests to Sekido, the rage copy, that after tearing off her arms, he might try impaling her, planning terrible things with Nezuko's immortal body. However, Nezuko refuses to give up. With a ferocious blow, she tears off the demon's jaw with a kick. Determined, Nezuko tears off her own arm to break free and, with her blood ablaze, sets the demon on fire using her special technique. She then tears off the arm of the demon that was holding the fan, spinning it into a powerful and graceful strike. Nezuko uses the demon's fan to send it flying with a powerful gust of wind. When she tries to repeat the blow against the rage demon, it reacts quickly by driving the Bakuya into Nezuko's throat, forcing her to her knees. It steps on her thigh and activates its lightning, paralyzing her. Meanwhile, in the forest, Tanjiro continues to be attacked by the sharp claws of the Joy Demon. At the same time, the Sorrow Demon tries to make sure Genya is dead, but to his surprise, Genya gets back up once more, chanting his Buddhist prayers, which makes the demon nervous at the disturbing sight. Even with his body riddled with wounds, Genya rises and tells the demon that he knows the name of the one who will kill him. Elsewhere, Tanjiro stands facing the Joy Demon and the building where Nezuko is being hurt. He decides to use the demon itself to his advantage and runs toward the trees, luring it in. The demon falls for his trap and chases after him, and when it seems like he will be struck by the enemy's claws, Tanjiro dodges at the last second and drives his sword into the demon's mouth, cutting its tongue. Both of them begin flying out of control, with Tanjiro gripping the sword lodged in the demon as it tries to pierce him with its claws. The two crash violently into the mansion where the demons are. When they arrive, Tanjiro sees Nezuko being hurt by the anger demon's staff, which pierces her neck while lightning bolts pin her in place. Without hesitation, Tanjiro launches his attack. The anger demon summons another staff in his hand and tries to strike Tanjiro, but he defends himself using the joy demon's foot, which shares the same cells as the anger demon and is therefore unaffected by the lightning. He aims for the demon's tongue and cuts it, making it take longer to regenerate. He then runs to Nezuko and, using the demon's foot in his hand, manages to remove the electric tool that was piercing his sister. However, the demon recovers and presses Tanjiro against the ground with the staff at his nape. This time though, the demon cannot complete the attack, because Nezuko is holding the enemy back, matching his strength. To weaken him, she sets her body on fire once again. As they fight, the pleasure clone appears in the sky with his fan and launches a powerful gust of air at the siblings, burying them and sending them crashing to the floor below, where they fall unconscious. Now 3 clones of the upper rank demon surround the unconscious siblings. Meanwhile, in the Swordsmith village, a state of alert is declared due to the demon invasion. Hundreds of fish-shaped creatures with pots on their backs attack the residents, causing widespread panic. Mitsuri Kanroji, who was nearby, runs toward the village with her crow at her side, determined to help as quickly as possible. At the same time, Muichiro is carrying Kotetsu on his back while searching for Haganezuka. They find Kanamori being attacked by a demon, but manage to save him in time. During the conversation, Muichiro asks for a sword, but Kanamori reveals that he had already spoken with Tanjiro, who had instructed him to be understanding when they met. Kanamori tries to explain more details, but Kotetsu interrupts him, reminding everyone of the urgency of saving Haganezuka, and they head to the shed where Kotetsu says he can find a sword for Muichiro. When they are almost there, Kanamori suggests that Muichiro go ahead to grab the sword and save the others, but Muichiro holds him back, sensing that something is wrong. From one of the nearby bushes emerges a talking pot, revealing a new imminent danger. Tokito goes on high alert, cautiously advancing toward the pot, which remarks that it is surprised they noticed its presence. The pot then recognizes Tokito as a Hashira. Upper Moon 5, Ryoko emerges from inside the pot and, with an air of curiosity, asks whether that abandoned shed was truly so important, questioning what they could possibly be hiding there. Meanwhile, the village residents continue to be attacked by Gyoko's creatures. The love Hashira, Mitsuri Kanroji, appears to save the day and quickly figures out how to defeat the fish demons by cutting the pots they carry on their backs. With impressive speed, Mitsuri defeats all the demons present and moves on to rescue the village chief. The leader is in a desperate situation, being crushed by a demon, and all the hunters assigned to protect him have already been killed. The village chief, one of the most talented swordsmiths, is on the brink of death, but Mitsuri arrives just in time, brandishing her flexible sword. A swordsmith who tries to defend the chief is amazed by Mitsuri's unusual sword style and form. Wasting no time, she uses the first form of love breathing and, with extreme ease, destroys the pot controlling the fish demon. Mitsuri saves the village chief at the last moment, before he hits the ground. Noticing that he is speaking to her, though a little dazed, Mitsuri concludes that he is out of danger. Elsewhere, Tanjiro catches a familiar scent and realizes he had been dreaming. He wakes up beside Nezuko, fleeing from Hantengu's clones. With Nezuko on his back, Tanjiro tries to escape. A clone flies toward him. Tanjiro tries to flee with Nezuko in his arms, but there is no time as Karaku pursues them again, this time heading for a wider area with no escape options. The siblings are hurled out of the house, and Nezuko, still airborne, manages to grab hold of Tanjiro's sword. After the impact of the destruction, Nezuko is left with half her body buried, but refuses to let go of Tanjiro's sword, even slicing her own hand in the process. Meanwhile, Hantengu's clones continue searching for them. With Tokito, Gyoko begins to speak, declaring that he will introduce himself and summons another pot from which a black, viscous liquid begins to ooze. From inside, it emerges something horrifying. Several swordsmiths have been fused into a single creature, with their swords still lodged in their mutilated bodies. Gyoko begins to boast about his work of art, reveling in the suffering of the victims, while Kotetsu watches in terror. Tokito, however, can take no more and charges at the demon, wrapping himself in mist, and nearly manages to decapitate Gyoko, but the demon is fast and escapes across the rooftops. Tokito realizes that Gyoko can move between pots with extreme speed and decides to destroy the pots he is using to travel. While Tokito wonders how these pots keep appearing, Gyoko grows increasingly furious. The demon then summons more pots, from which small fish emerge that fire poisoned needles. Tokito easily dodges them, but the needles also target Kotetsu. When they are about to hit him, Kanamori steps in front to protect him. However, Tokito, faster than both, interposes himself and takes the attack in their place. Pierced by several needles and wounded, Tokito orders them to leave, as they are getting in the way of his fight. He continues facing Gyoko's attacks, growing more and more wounded by the poison needles. Gyoko comments that his needles carry paralytic poison while insulting the swordsmiths, calling them useless. These words stir a memory in Tokito, who becomes pensive, recalling his past. When he composes himself, he charges back into the attack, cutting and breaking Gyoko's hand. However, the demon regenerates instantly, and a new hand grows, from which yet another pot emerges. This pot creates a water bubble that imprisons Tokito. The Hashira cannot cut the bubble from the inside, and Gyoko gloats that he has neutralized his greatest weapon. The demon begins imagining what he will do with Tokito's body, revealing his plans to destroy the swordsmith village and eventually capture Ubayashiki, the leader of the Demon Slayer Corps. Meanwhile, on the battlefield, Nezuko continues to hold Tanjiro's sword and bathes it in her own blood. After great effort, she manages to set the blade on fire, transforming it from black to red. Tanjiro, watching this scene, begins to remember a distant past with a woman who looks very much like Nezuko, and of himself a little older. Tanjiro connects his memories with those inherited from the samurai with the Hanafuda earrings and feels that this sword is drawing ever closer to the one wielded by Yorichi, the legendary swordsman. He draws strength from remembering everyone who helped him reach this point, and, even gravely wounded, decides he must give everything he has to defeat the demons. He then positions himself before the demons, drawing their attention. When the winged clone charges at Tanjiro, the anger clone begins to recall a flaming sword through the shared memories of Muzan. It remembers the swordsman who nearly decapitated Muzan, which causes it to tremble with fear. At that moment, a flame-shaped mark appears on Tanjiro's forehead, making his appearance even more similar to Yorichi's. Tanjiro activates sun breathing, and, with breathtaking speed and precision, delivers a series of decapitations. He passes first through the winged demon, then charges without hesitation at the fan demon, and finally decapitates the anger demon with ease, cutting its staff in half in the process. He names this technique the beheading dance. The three demons fall together and Tanjiro reflects on his past battles, particularly the upper moon he had previously defeated. He prepares to face the last demon, but realizes that Genya had already decapitated the creature. However, Genya appears disturbed, with his eyes transformed into something terrifying. But the problems are not over. The severed parts of the demons Tanjiro thought he had defeated begin to move and speak. He realizes that, unlike other battles, simply decapitating them all at once, as had been done with Gyutaro and Daki, would not be the solution. At that moment, Nezuko awakens and begins to stir, and Tanjiro helps her out of the rubble. As the two embrace, Tanjiro begins to ponder something that has been bothering him for some time. He thinks that perhaps the demons' heads are not their vital points. Something seems wrong with these demons. The scent he caught, even if only for a brief moment, suggests the presence of a fifth demon. He decides to search for this demon, but before he can begin, Genya grabs him by the neck and tells Tanjiro not to interfere, as he himself would be the one responsible for defeating the demons. Genya begins to talk about the reason Tanjiro has not yet been promoted to Hashira, and reveals his own ambitions to achieve that rank. Tanjiro, ignoring the taunts, responds calmly that he would support him, just as Nezuko would. He mentions the presence of a fifth demon, and asks Genya to cover him while he searches for the demon. Initially, Genya does not believe him, but Tanjiro's sincerity ends up winning his trust. However, before they can act, Tanjiro hears the anger demon's staff. He quickly shoves Genya out of the way and dodges a lightning bolt. He then asks Genya and Nezuko to fight the four demons, but warns Genya not to hurt Nezuko, since she is his sister. The battle begins. Genya fires with his firearms breathing technique, while Tanjiro circles around trying to identify the peculiar scent he had detected before. During the battle, Nezuko faces one of the demons who uses his fan to violently churn the air. This movement disperses the sulfurous scent that had been present, allowing Tanjiro to finally locate the fifth demon. Tanjiro concentrates, sniffs the air more intensely, and finds the fifth demon hidden in its fearful form among the bushes. He heads toward the demon, but his advance draws the attention of the anger demon, who summons the staff to block Tanjiro. He manages to shout the demon's location to Genya, but the anger demon keeps hurling lightning to hinder his progress. Tanjiro asks Nezuko to hold on for a moment, but before he can advance, the pleasure demon hurls him away with his fan. Tanjiro manages to grab onto a tree trunk, but realizes the anger demon is about to fire lightning in his direction. Nezuko runs to intercept the attack, but is stopped by the sorrow demon, who impales her in the stomach, leaving the path clear for the anger demon. Meanwhile, Joko continues imprisoning Muichiro, planning to drown him slowly. The Hashira remains calm, trying to analyze whether his sword could free him, but it seems all sides of the water prison are the same and none of his breathing techniques work inside it. He knows this could be his last breath. Nezuko, on the other hand, continues to fight bravely against the sorrow demon, even impaled by the spear. However, she cannot break free, and the sorrow demon mercilessly asks Sekido to crucify her. A flame appears before her, and, in a sudden vision, her mother is decapitated. Tanjiro snaps back to reality and resumes the battle with greater strength. A nearby demon tries to attack him, but Tanjiro is faster and more efficient than ever. Tanjiro's progress, especially under pressure, is remarkable. Meanwhile, Nezuko drives the sorrow demon's spear even deeper into her own body to get closer to the demon. When she is close enough, she grabs his head and uses her blood to set the demon's body on fire. The demon is about to be decapitated by Tanjiro. However, before he can land the finishing blow, Karaku uses his fan to slam Tanjiro into the ground with overwhelming force, as if pressing him down with immense gravity. He then goes after Genya once more. Even in pain, Tanjiro cuts Karaku's arm to buy Genya time, but the situation still seems hopeless. Tanjiro tries to give Genya coordinates, but he needs to find them on his own. While Genya searches for the demon, Tanjiro continues to be pummeled by the enemy. However, at a certain point in the forest, Tanjiro realizes they are nearing the right location. He shouts for Genya to look down, where the true body of the fifth demon, tiny and hidden among the vegetation, lies. Genya advances and tries to strike the small demon with his sword, but the blade shatters upon contact. He fires at the demon, but the shots are ineffective, which only deepens his despair. At that moment, the anger demon appears behind Genya, with his staff aimed directly at his head, ready to deliver the finishing blow. Terrified, Genya knows he cannot regenerate his head and begins to fear for his life. He thinks of his older brother, Sanemi, and of his desire to be recognized by him. Genya yearns to be accepted and forgiven by Sanemi. He recalls his childhood when his mother, a small-framed woman, protected them with all her strength, even though she was constantly mistreated by their father, a large and violent man. Their father, though physically imposing, was a useless and abusive man who ended up being stabbed to death. Despite this, their mother always fought to protect her children. One night, however, she disappeared and Sanemi went out to look for her. Later, someone knocked at the door. The children ran to open it, thinking it would be their mother, but Genya, suspicious, told them to wait, as it could be someone else. Indeed, the worst happened. Even with the door closed, the children were attacked and blood spread everywhere. Genya was struck and the demon broke into the house. When the demon advanced on him, Sanemi appeared, saving Genya and telling him to run. Genya saw his siblings wounded, but still alive, and told them to press their wounds before going out to find Sanemi. However, when he reached a certain point in the village, he found his brother and his mother. His mother was on the ground, burning under the sunlight, while Sanemi watched in shock. Confused and frightened, Genya began to accuse his brother of being a murderer, not understanding that his mother had turned into a demon. In the present, Genya still carries the weight of that misunderstanding and desperately wishes to apologize to Sanemi. He still remembers the panic of that night and what he had thought was a wolf, but which was in fact his mother transformed into a demon. Sanemi had fought their transformed mother, dragging her into the sun to destroy her. When Genya finally found his brother, the one who had defended him with his very life, he accused and denounced him. At the moment he had promised to protect the family, Sanemi had said that without their father things would be better for him, but difficult for the rest of the family. They then decided they would protect the children from that point on. Genya laments dying without having had the chance to apologize to his brother, but takes comfort in knowing that his last memory will be of Sanemi's smile. He was never able to master breathing techniques, and for that reason could never become a Hashira. Yet his desire to grow closer to his brother and ask for forgiveness is what keeps him standing. At that moment, Tanjiro appears, bringing new hope. With a swift strike, he tears off the anger demon's arm once more, preventing the enemy from crushing Genya's head. Tanjiro tells Genya to go after the demon's true body, assuring him that this time he will succeed in killing him. However, the Sorrow demon appears behind them and prepares his thrusting technique. Tanjiro senses the danger and realizes he will not be able to escape in time, bracing himself for the impact. Surprisingly though, he feels nothing. When he looks back, he sees that Genya has been completely run through in order to protect him. Even gravely wounded, Genya insists that Tanjiro keep going, as he is the only one capable of decapitating the demon. In a lightly playful tone, Genya says that this time he will let Tanjiro take the credit for the victory. Tanjiro advances, aware of just how small the demon's true body is, and manages to corner it. He finds an opening and drives his sword into the demon's neck, which lets out an agonizing scream. However, before Tanjiro can celebrate, he senses the presence of another powerful entity. The scent of the other 4 demons returns, but now they have fused into one. When everything seemed fragile and Tanjiro was about to be defeated, the demon emitted the sound of a drum, summoning wooden dragons that surrounded him. At that moment, Nezuko appears and saves Tanjiro from being devoured by the dragons. The demon's face is finally revealed, showing that it has transformed into a more powerful and threatening form. While Tanjiro tries to face the main body, Genya battles the remaining demons. In a critical moment, the anger demon uses its powers to absorb the joy demon and the pleasure demon, increasing its strength further. It then absorbs the sorrow demon as well, resulting in a terrifying transformation. Now with a suffocating aura, the demon saps the strength from Tanjiro's and Genya's arms and legs, making it hard even to breathe. Tanjiro, bewildered, asks why the demon is calling them terrible villains. The demon responds by saying that they were trying to kill a weak being incapable of defending itself. Enraged, Tanjiro retorts that the true villain is the demon itself and swears to cut its head off, beginning the battle. Meanwhile, Muichiro is trapped inside Gyoko's water pot, his lungs nearly out of air. He laments the impossibility of surviving and wishes that his master would send 2 more Hashiras to help them in the fight. Suddenly, a different voice speaks to Muichiro, similar to Tanjiro's, but with words he had never said. Intrigued, Muichiro tries to discover the origin of the voice. Meanwhile, Gyoko invades the hut where the swordsmiths are working. He attacks one of them, but notices that Hagenezuka, the one responsible for forging the swords, remains focused, ignoring the attacks and maintaining admirable serenity. Gyoko concludes that killing him would be easy, but needs to find a way to interrupt the forging process. While Muichiro converses with the illusion, Kotetsu appears and tries to pull him out of the water pot. Small demons appear and attack Kotetsu, wounding him gravely. Surprisingly, rather than giving up, Kotetsu inflates bubbles of air inside the pot, allowing Muichiro to regain his breath. With a clearer mind, Muichiro realizes that the words of the illusion were, in fact, the words of his own father. He then uses the second form of mist breathing to free himself from the pot, and prepares to face Gyoko. Muichiro quickly removes all the needles. To his surprise, several mini-demons emerge and advance toward him. In the midst of this tense situation, a memory of his father appears in his mind. Muichiro recalls that his father was a woodcutter, and that one time he went out to fetch medicine for his sick mother. Unfortunately, a fatal accident took his father's life that day, causing Muichiro to lose both of the most important people in his life. He also reveals the existence of his twin brother Yuichiro, who had a bitter outlook on life and did not believe in passion or trust between people. Yuichiro used to look down on Muichiro, considering him incompetent and purposeless. Life between the two brothers was far from easy. However, Muichiro had a significant encounter with a woman named Amane, who revealed to him the rare lineage of swordsmen who used the first breathing, encouraging him to become a demon slayer. When Muichiro shares his desire to become a swordsman with his brother, Yuichiro reacts negatively, ridiculing the idea, and reminding Muichiro of his supposed past failures. The argument drives them apart, and the brothers stop speaking to each other. During the summer, while Muichiro was drinking water, a demon appears at their house. Yuichiro defends Muichiro from the attack, but ends up losing his left arm in the process. Enraged, Muichiro, in a moment of desperation, ends up crushing the demon, saving his brother from the imminent threat. Despite the demon having been defeated, Muichiro's primary concern was Yuichiro's health and safety. Upon returning to the room, he finds his brother, who reveals an important secret. The mu in his name is not merely a meaningless sound, but means infinity. Cloud marks appear on Muichiro's cheeks, and he springs into action against the demons using his fourth form of breathing. Although Kotetsu was unharmed, he asks Muichiro to go save Haganezuka. Gyoko, furious, launches an attack that blasts them out of the house. Despite this, Muichiro and another swordsmith are struck, but thanks to the Hashira's skill and his gratitude for the forged sword, they manage to escape the danger, remembering the words of his first swordsmith. Muichiro charges at the demon and makes a precise cut at his neck. Gyoko tells Muichiro not to underestimate him, but the Hashira responds firmly. The demon does not pay much attention until Muichiro provokes him, pointing out that Gyoko's pot was asymmetrical and dreadful. This observation awakens a tremendous rage in the demon, who uses his blood demon art, summoning 10,000 flying fish. Muichiro, however, is not rattled. With his sixth form of mist breathing, he defeats all the fish with ease and, to Gyoko's surprise, his attacks have no effect. Not even the poison released by the fish takes effect, and Muichiro then uses the third form to dispel it. At that moment, Gyoko reveals his true form, one that is rarely seen. Muichiro dismisses the transformation, irritating the demon further. Gyoko attacks Muichiro, who dodges the strikes though his clothing is disintegrated by the demon's attack. Trading provocations, Muichiro responds to Gyoko's taunts and recalls moments close to death, when he had visions of worms consuming his body and his brothers. The fight continues with Gyoko using unpredictable attacks, until Muichiro delivers the seventh form of mist breathing. Gyoko begins attacking blindly in the hope of hitting the Hashira, but Muichiro questions why the demon thought he was not taking the fight seriously, and then cuts off the demon's head, defeating him completely. After the victory, Muichiro faints, but is saved by the swordsmith, who rushes to help him. Upon waking, Muichiro has a flashback of Rengoku, and feels the support of his family at his side. Meanwhile, Tanjiro's and the others' battle continues. At that moment, the love Hashira, Mitsuri Kanroji, arrives amid the moonlight and saves Tanjiro, taking the lead in the fight and showcasing her attacks with her flexible sword. When she enters the battle, she is insulted and called a show-off. She is attacked by Urogi, and Tanjiro is impressed by Mitsuri's dexterity in wielding the sword. The enemy strikes and Mitsuri responds using the second and sixth forms of love breathing. Tanjiro realizes that cutting the demon's neck would be pointless, but has no time to warn Mitsuri, who ends up taking a sonic scream at point-blank range. Mitsuri's resistance impresses the enemy, as she keeps her body intact despite the impact. While he prepares to deliver the final blow, we are taken into a flashback where we see Mitsuri as a young child, when her mother told the story of how she had lifted a 15-kilogram stone. From a young age, Mitsuri was known for winning multiple arm wrestling matches and ate a great deal. Over time, she began comparing herself to other girls, questioning whether she could be more feminine. Because of this, she pretended to be weak, dyed her hair black, and started eating less, living through an internal crisis over who she truly should be. Returning to the fight, Tanjiro, Genya, and Nezuko manage to save Mitsuri from the demon's attack. After the demon launches a powerful attack, Mitsuri cuts him, determined to save everyone and prove that she would not be defeated. She remembers her master, who encouraged her to take pride in her strength, and understands that those who judge her are in fact simply envious of her talent. She also recalls Obanai, who introduced her to the Demon Slayer Corps. Then she stands up and attacks the demon, asking the others to go after the main body while she distracts it. Tanjiro manages to detect the scent of the main body. The enemy notices a mark on Mitsuri's neck. Upon returning to the main body, they attack the rapidly growing tree that moves at high speed. With no other options, Genya begins to bite through the wood until he manages to reach the main body. With the help of Nezuko's blood demon art, they manage to open the cocoon, but realize the body is not there. Seeing the body fleeing again, Tanjiro grows furious and shouts at the demon to face its responsibilities. The demon recalls a time when it was also told to take responsibility in the past, and the pursuit continues. Genya, realizing they cannot catch it, pulls a tree from the ground and throws it in front of the demon to block its escape. However, the demon grows ever faster, and Tanjiro, due to the leg injury he suffered during the fight, is slower than the others. Remembering Zenitsu's advice about thunder breathing, Tanjiro concentrates his energy into every fiber of his leg, allowing him to use the technique and catch up to the demon. When he brings his swords to the demon's neck, it grows rapidly and begins to crush Tanjiro's head. Genya and Nezuko intervene to help him, but in the process, Genya ends up being burned by Nezuko's flames. Tanjiro continues trying to cut the demon, but in an act of desperation, the demon throws itself off the cliff, taking both of them along. Now without both arms, the demon seeks human flesh to recover its strength. Meanwhile, Tanjiro wakes up and goes after the demon, leaping from a tree and preparing to pursue it. At that moment, Muichiro calls out to him and throws a sword to Tanjiro, who catches it before Muichiro faints. Tanjiro combines two styles, thunder and sun, and finally manages to cut the demon. The larger demon that contained the body of the other demon is also defeated. However, upon cutting the head of this demon, Tanjiro notices there was a word written on its tongue. When he realizes the sun is rising, he sees that Nezuko is being burned by the light. He finds himself torn between saving his sister and protecting the swordsmiths, since the headless demon is still pursuing them. While trying to shield her from the sun, Nezuko shrinks in size and curls up inside him. Nezuko makes a decision and kicks Tanjiro in the direction of the demon, sacrificing herself to help him. While fighting the demon, Tanjiro remembers all the battles he faced alongside Nezuko, from the time she became a demon up to the present day. With this resolve, Tanjiro cuts the demon and finally the neck of the main body. The upper demon's past is revealed. He was a cowardly and cruel human who committed crimes and thefts, but was transformed by Muzan to survive in the sun and quench his thirst for blood. The demon burns until he completely disappears. After the fight, Tanjiro is in tears, relieved to have won, but devastated by the apparent loss of Nezuko. However, Nezuko surprises everyone by greeting the day, resisting the sun. The swordsmiths are moved, and so is Tanjiro, who embraces his sister and weeps with joy at seeing her well. The focus then shifts back to Mitsuri's fight, and the battle reaches a critical point, where she is about to be defeated. But miraculously, the demon's body disintegrates, saving Mitsuri. Elsewhere, where Muzan was hiding, he celebrates the discovery of a demon who resists the sun. After killing a family of humans, his past is revealed, showing his transformation into a demon and his search for the blue wisteria flower. Muichiro thanks Tanjiro, as it was thanks to him that he was able to recover his memories, and promises to reveal something important. Tamayo writes a letter explaining that Nezuko's blood continues to change, and that she may soon be capable of conquering the sun. On the day Tanjiro departs from the village, the leaders thank him for his protection. The Wind Hashira, Sanemi, and the Serpent Hashira, Obanai, are investigating a series of kidnappings near an old castle. During the investigation, they encounter one of Muzan's demons carrying a kidnapped woman toward the castle. Immediately, the Hashiras follow and find themselves before a fortress full of demons, who are easily defeated by the two. Sanemi uses the second form of wind breathing to devastate the horde of demons, while Obanai uses the fifth form of serpent breathing to decapitate the enemies with a single strike. The demon carrying the woman tries to escape when it senses the power of the swordsman, but is quickly pursued by Sanemi, while Obanai rescues the hostage. Even surrounded by a horde of demons, Sanemi uses the fourth form of his breathing to finish them all off effortlessly. The Hashiras continue their pursuit into the castle, but upon entering, they find a maze of endless corridors and halls infested with more demons. Without realizing it, they fall into the Infinity Castle, but the dimension vanishes before their eyes, leaving Sanemi frustrated as he stabs only empty ground. Meanwhile, in the Swordsmith village, Tanjiro recovers and reflects on Nezuko's recent immunity to sunlight. He does not know whether this is transforming her back into a human or whether she is evolving into a complete demon. An emergency meeting of the Hashiras is convened. Mitsuri and Muichiro discuss their recent victories against the Upper Moons. Lady Amane appears to inform them that Kagaya Ubayashiki is gravely ill and will no longer be able to meet with them. She also warns that Muzan, knowing of the existence of a demon immune to sunlight, will focus all his efforts on capturing Nezuko, suggesting that war is imminent. Amane speaks about the mysterious marks that appeared on Mitsuri and Muichiro during their battles and asks them to explain how they arose, as these marks, associated with the first slayers who nearly defeated Muzan, may be essential for awakening the same power in the other Hashiras. Muichiro explains that he manifested the mark by pushing past extreme physical limits during battle. However, Amane warns of a negative consequence for those who awaken this mark, without revealing exactly what it would be. Tomioka leaves the meeting, stating that it does not concern him, and is confronted by Sanemi and Shinobu. Zenitsu returns and is warmly welcomed, but grows furious when Nezuko confuses him with Inosuke. Haganezuka reappears and delivers Tanjiro's new katana, explaining that the blade was forged before the creation of the Demon Slayer Corps, and possesses the power of destruction. The story continues with Genya recovering alongside Tanjiro. Inosuke arrives abruptly, announcing the beginning of a new group strengthening training, commanded by the Hashiras. Uzui trains the Slayers, preparing them for the challenge, while his wives prepare meals during rest periods. The training is divided into several stages, each commanded by a Hashira: speed with Muichiro, flexibility with Mitsuri, sword techniques with Obanai, powerful strikes with Sanemi, and muscle strengthening with Gyume. Tanjiro is informed that Tomioka will not be participating in the training, something that surprises him. In another scene, Tamayo is approached by a messenger crow from Ubayashiki, who invites her to join the Demon Slayer Corps in order to collaborate on the study of demonic physiology and help in the defeat of Muzan, offering her the opportunity to work alongside Shinobu to better understand Nezuko's case. And so begins the preparation of the Slayers for the imminent war against Muzan, and the start of an intense training regimen that promises to push all the swordsmen to their limits. Yushiro notices strange movement and runs to Tamayo's room, finding her closing the window. He thinks they have been discovered and begins planning an escape, but Tamayo reveals that with Nezuko's immunity to the sun, great changes were on the way. She asks for Yushiro's help in organizing everything, as they would be moving once again, this time to the headquarters of the Demon Slayer Corps. Meanwhile, Tanjiro reads a letter from Ubayashiki explaining that he is gravely ill and asks Tanjiro to speak with Tomioka in his place. As unity among the Hashiras is vital, Tanjiro goes to Tomioka's house, who initially ignores him, but Tanjiro's insistence makes him let him in. He tries to convince Tomioka to train with him, but the water Hashira refuses, irritated by the fact that Tanjiro has still not mastered water breathing, which he believes should make him the next water Hashira. Tomioka reveals that he does not consider himself worthy of being a Hashira, and that Sabito, his friend who died during the final selection, should hold that position. Tomioka tells of his past, saying that he and Sabito were orphans and became very close friends. Sabito died saving Tomioka and defeating several demons in the final selection, but was ironically the only one who did not survive. This left Tomioka with a profound sense of inadequacy, as he had not defeated a single demon and yet passed the selection. He carries this guilt to this day, believing he does not deserve to be a Hashira, which distances him from the other pillars. Even after hearing this story, Tanjiro insists on supporting Tomioka, highlighting the value of passing on Sabito's legacy. This makes Tomioka recall a moment in his youth, when Sabito rebuked him for indulging in self-pity. Sabito reminded him that his sister had given her life to protect him, and that he should honor that sacrifice by living and carrying that legacy forward. Moved by Tanjiro's insistence, Tomioka decides to participate in the training. After this decision, the two have a friendly competition to see who can eat the most noodles. Tomioka comments on Shinobu and asks Tanjiro about her training, but he does not know either. Shinobu, for her part, appears agitated and tries to contain her emotions, while Kanao, her adopted sister, invites her to Sanemi's training. Shinobu decides it is time to tell Kanao about the demon who killed her sister, and to share the plan to defeat it, revealing an emotional conflict the Hashira had been suppressing for a long time. The rigorous training of the Slayers under the supervision of Uzu, who is now a former Hashira, is emphasized with intense exercises that go far beyond a simple warm-up. He warns that without improving their physical conditioning, the Slayers will not be able to advance to the following phases, which would be even more challenging. Tanjiro joins the training, thanking Uzu for having saved his life in the past. Despite the efforts of Tanjiro and the other Slayers, the difficulty of keeping up with the former Hashira surprises everyone. During a break, Tanjiro reunites with Uzui's wives, who express their gratitude for him having helped save their lives in the entertainment district. Meanwhile, the Slayers notice an unusual decrease in demon activity, raising the suspicion that the demons are searching for Nezuko. The Slayers detect a strange sound, followed by the revelation that Upper Moon 4 has been replaced, and the new demon begins following them without being detected. Elsewhere, Sanemi reunites with Obanai, and they discuss the mysterious castle they saw recently, where several demons disappeared quickly. Obanai expresses concern that something big is coming, a premonition that Sanemi does not share, but both continue to train the Slayers as per Ubayashiki's wishes. Uzui, as part of the nighttime training, proposes a challenge in which he would play the role of a demon, and the Slayers would have to survive and defeat him. Tanjiro takes on the mission of protecting his colleagues and defeating Uzui, who even with his current physical limitations, proves extremely fast and powerful. Tanjiro and Uzui enter into an intense duel, with the other Slayers admiring their skills. The battle continues until Uzui acknowledges the improvement in Tanjiro since his last fight against the Upper Moons. He also motivates the Slayers to give their best, for even if they are not on the level of Tanjiro or a Hashira, they could still contribute in the final battle to come against Muzan. After training, Uzui releases Tanjiro to move on to the next phase of Hashira training, reminding him that Despite some upper moons having been defeated, the true end would only come with the destruction of Muzan. Motivated, Tanjiro says his farewells and arrives at the mansion where he watches Muichiro Tokito, the missed Hashira, in action. Impressed by the skill and speed of the young Hashira during his training, Tanjiro then begins his training with Muichiro Tokito, arriving in time to see the Hashira training with some slayers who struggle to keep up with his ability. Muichiro swordsmith Kozo Kanamori is happy to see Tanjiro well after the events of the swordsmith village, promising to help with Tokito's training. Tokito, ever serious, instructs the slayers to suppress their emotions in order to improve their chances in battle. The exhausted slayers ask Tanjiro to intercede and ask Tokito to go easier on them, but Tanjiro reveals that the Hashira was already reducing the intensity of the training. After training, Tanjiro notices Tokito slipping out the back of the mansion, and upon asking where the Hashira is headed, discovers that no one knows exactly where he goes. In parallel, we see that Tokito is being followed by demons in the shape of eyeballs marked with the number 4, indicating that Nakime, the new Upper Moon 4 and guardian of the Infinity Castle, is watching his every move. Meanwhile, Obanai Iguro and Senemi Shinazugawa, the Serpent and Wind Pillars, are engaged in an intense training session using their respective techniques. The battle is evenly matched until Tokito appears, wanting to join in. Obanai and Senemi, impressed, accept Tokito's presence, and the three pillars engage in a high-level bout, described as a true battle between Hashiras. In the end, Senemi acknowledges that the training was beneficial, but warns that such an intense bout can result in serious injuries. Back with the group, Tokito, unsatisfied with the level of the slayers, decides to raise the difficulty, proposing to train with real blades. Although the slayers are tense, Tokito acknowledges that the first to face the new format showed progress by not attacking without strategy. When it is Tanjiro's turn, he impresses Tokito with his speed and ability to absorb advice quickly. Tokito acknowledges that Tanjiro is already ready for the next phase of training, surprising Tanjiro himself and the slayers around him. To help the slayers improve their relationship with Tokito, Tanjiro suggests a friendly paper airplane competition, a pastime of the Hashira, so that he would become kinder to the others. Even with the challenge, Tokito wins the contest, but the gesture brings him closer to the slayers, fostering a sense of camaraderie. In the end, Tanjiro and Tokito talk about Nezuko and Muzan's plans, with Tokito assuring him that together they will succeed in defeating the villain. Tanjiro then heads to the residence of Mitsuri Kanroji, the love Hashira, for the next stage of his training. Upon arriving, he is warmly welcomed by the Hashira. After this friendly reception, she asks Tanjiro and the other slayers to wear pink uniforms and take part in stretching and gymnastics exercises, where Mitsuri impresses everyone with her flexibility. Although the training is light and fun, it serves to improve the slayers' agility and elasticity, something Tanjiro manages to keep up with easily. Next, Tanjiro goes to the residence of Obanai Iguro, the Serpent Hashira, who shows jealousy over the time Tanjiro spent with Mitsuri. Obanai does not make the training easy, demanding that Tanjiro strike bells while dodging other slayers who are bound and terrified. Obanai positions himself as yet another obstacle, forcing Tanjiro to sharpen his concentration. After days of training, Tanjiro becomes more precise and strikes Obanai, marking the end of that phase of his training, but Obanai still warns him to keep his distance from Mitsuri. Next, Tanjiro finds Zenitsu, who is trying to flee from the brutal training of Sanemi Shinazogawa, the Wind Hashira. Sanemi, with an uncompromising attitude, forces the slayers to fight until exhaustion. When Tanjiro tries to face him, Sanemi strikes him harshly, but Tanjiro fights back, showing courage. The confrontation between the two is intense, and Tanjiro overhears an argument between Sanemi and his brother Genya, which reveals the troubled relationship between them. Sanemi scoffs at Genya for being unable to use breathing and even threatens to break his legs. Genya tries to defend Sanemi despite being insulted, while Tanjiro intervenes in an attempt to protect him. The battle continues until nightfall, but Tanjiro ends up being punished for disrespecting Sanemi, having his training with him suspended. Discouraged, Tanjiro reflects on his apparent lack of progress, but Zenitsu encourages him, pointing out that he was the only one capable of facing the Wind Hashira. Together, they head to a waterfall where they find Inosuke and other slayers training under the supervision of Gyome Himejima, the Stone Hashira. Gyome explains the importance of strengthening the body's core, especially the legs, to increase the precision of attacks and the effectiveness of defense. His training is divided into 3 stages. Enduring the icy waterfall, lifting logs, and pushing a boulder 100 meters. The cold water of the waterfall is so intense that the slayers seek relief on the rocks warmed by the sun. Tanjiro, determined, tries to begin training but finds Inosuke passed out from exhaustion. Tanjiro attempts to face the waterfall, but the strong current makes him lose his balance. Murata, who is beside him, teaches Tanjiro to chant a Buddhist mantra to concentrate and remain conscious during training. Despite his efforts, Tanjiro fails the first attempt, with Murata warning him of the risk of the force of the water breaking his neck if he relaxes. In the next phase, Tanjiro and Inosuke are encouraged to lift logs, with Gyomei showcasing his strength by pushing an enormous boulder with ease, surprising everyone, including Zenjutsu, who had doubted his power. Tanjiro and Zenjutsu continue trying to endure the waterfall, and after great effort, finally complete this phase and advance to the logs. Tanjiro, though exhausted, manages to lift the logs over his head. Meanwhile, in the city, Nakime, a follower of Muzan, continues tracking the slayers and informs Muzan that she has already located 60% of the core, though she still has no leads on Nezuko. Muzan, satisfied with the progress, praises Nakime and Akaza, appearing confident that he will soon find Nezuko and Ubayashiki. Back to training, Tanjiro faces great difficulty moving the boulder and decides to take a break. He finds other slayers who, exhausted, have temporarily given up on training, but Tanjiro encourages them to continue. During the break, he cooks rice balls for his colleagues, who praise his culinary skills. This brings a moment of lightness amid the tension of the grueling training, making him recall his own family. After several days without success, Tanjiro worries about his lack of progress, reflecting that the demons would not wait for him. Genya finds him and comments that his mark has grown darker, suggesting this could be a sign of advancement. Genya, who has already completed the boulder training, offers tips, explaining that the secret lies in the repetition of movements and maximum concentration. He suggests that Tanjiro do something that helps him release his emotions, such as chanting a mantra. Inspired, Tanjiro decides to follow Genya's advice and, upon trying to move the boulder once more, recalls the struggles of Gyomei and Genya, who used anger and pain to increase their heart rates and raise their body temperature. Recreating this technique, Tanjiro manages to move the boulder, but is soon overcome by exhaustion. That night, Genya asks about Tanjiro's progress, who admits there is still much to improve. Genya encourages him, saying that what matters is controlling one's emotions during training. The next morning, before dawn, Tanjiro tries again. He visualizes the people he loves and recalls Rengoku's last words, which give him a new strength. His mark intensifies and he finally manages to move the boulder, to the surprise of Zenitsu and Inosuke. In the Infinity Castle, Muzan is reflecting on his next move and Ubayashiki's plans. Tanjiro manages to move the boulder, and his achievement inspires Inosuke to try the same. Shortly after, the boarhead also manages to move the rock. Zenitsu, surprised, complains about being the only one who has not yet completed the training. However, his complaint is interrupted by the arrival of Shuntaro, his sparrow, who tries to catch his attention with a mysterious letter. Meanwhile, Tanjiro begins to feel dehydrated and starts to hallucinate after so much effort. At that moment, Gyomei appears, and by pouring water over him, helps restore his consciousness. The stone Hashira informs him that Tanjiro has completed the training and takes the opportunity to praise his decisions during the events of the Swordsmith village. Gyomei highlights that he admires Tanjiro for having prioritized the safety of the villagers over his own sister Nezuko, considering it a commendable decision. However, Tanjiro, with humility, clarifies that this was Nezuko's choice, not his own. The sincerity of this statement impresses Gyomei, who takes the opportunity to share a story from his past. He recalls the time when he cared for orphaned children, forming a family with them. However, a tragedy occurred when one of the boys made a pact with a demon in exchange for his life, resulting in a demon invading the temple and taking the lives of nearly all the children. Only one survived, paralyzed with fear behind Gyomei. At that time, Gyomei was thin, timid, and blind, which made the children doubt his ability to protect them. However, he found the strength and faced the demon, dismembering it. Despite having suffered serious injuries, he recalls it being the first time he used his strength with such ferocity and managed to defeat the demon. However, at dawn, the only surviving child, still frightened, accused him of being the monster who had killed all the others. Tanjiro is shocked by this revelation, but Gyomei explains that the child's reaction, who was only 4 years old, was completely understandable given the disorientation of the moment. What hurt him most that day, he confesses, was the absence of a simple thank you. This incident resulted in his imprisonment under the charge of murder, and he nearly was executed were it not for Ubuyashiki's intervention. Since then, Yome has become a more distrustful person, including toward Tanjiro, but the young Slayer's humility was able to change his opinion. Yome reflects that in moments of the greatest pressure, a person's true essence is revealed, and in Tanjiro's case, that essence is pure and genuine. He promises to stand by Tanjiro, helping him not to stray from his path, leaving the young man moved and deeply grateful for the stone Hashira's words. Shortly after, Tanjiro meets up with Genya and Inosuke. During the conversation, he mentions that his next stop will be Tomioka's house. Genya takes the opportunity to mention that he is being monitored by Shinobu due to his ingestion of demon flesh, to ensure his health is not at risk. Noticing Zenitsu's absence, Tanjiro decides to go after his friend. When he finally finds him, he notices that something is different about him. Zenitsu is distant, and even his voice seems to have changed. Concerned, Tanjiro asks if everything is alright. Zenitsu, clutching a letter firmly, simply says that he has finally understood what he needs to do. Confused, Tanjiro insists, but Zenitsu avoids the conversation and soon bids him farewell. Upon arriving at Tomioka's house, Tanjiro comes upon the water Hashira in an intense training session with Sanemi, the wind Hashira. The fight between the two Hashiras is fierce, and for the first time, Tanjiro manages to follow their movements. Tomioka uses the fourth form of water breathing, but Sanemi dodges with ease and responds with the fifth form of wind breathing, resulting in an impact so strong that the wooden swords of both break apart. Sanemi, impetuous, suggests they continue the battle with bare hands, but Tanjiro intervenes, asking them to stop before someone gets hurt. To lighten the tense mood, Tanjiro offers rice balls he had brought for the two. He mentions that during training, he discovered that Sanemi likes rice balls with red bean filling, which irritates the wind Hashira even further. Tomioka thanks Tanjiro for the intervention, as he still did not know how to handle Sanemi's difficult temperament. With the rice ball tip, Tomioka now sees an opportunity to improve his relationship with the wind Hashira. Later, Sanemi heads to the next training session, this time with Obanai and Tokito. Irritated by the other Hashira's delay, he curses but suddenly notices something in the air. Opening his hand, he sees an eyeball, which he immediately crushes, realizing that the demons had infiltrated the Ubuyashiki mansion. Kagaya is being attended to by Amane when he senses the approach of a powerful presence. The unexpected visitor is none other than Muzan. The atmosphere shifts dramatically when the Demon King crosses through the gates of the mansion, calmly approaching Kagaya. Even weakened and with bandages over his eyes, Kagaya feels the overwhelming presence of Muzan. The cloud-covered moon and the darkness of the night create the darkest possible setting, the moment when demons are at the peak of their power. On one side, Kagaya, frail and ill. On the other, his greatest enemy, at the height of his strength and immortality. Kagaya greets him, while Muzan, never missing an opportunity, remarks on the pitiable state of the leader of the Slayers. After centuries of pursuit, Kagaya Ubuyashiki finally comes face to face with Muzan Kibutsuji, the Demon King. Kagaya comments that he always waited for this moment, imagining Muzan to be enraged with him, but the demon reveals only disappointment at finding his arch-enemy in such a deplorable state. Even weakened, Kagaya reveals that his survival owes to the will to defeat Muzan, though doctors had already predicted his death. Kagaya explains that he and Muzan share the same bloodline, but that with the passing of centuries, the blood that unites them has grown distant. He explains how his family was cursed after Muzan's birth, causing its members to be born weak and sickly. To break this curse, they formed the Demon Slayer Corps, which became Muzan's main obstacle. Marriages with descendants of priests helped reduce the effects of the curse, but no Ubuyashiki has ever lived past the age of 30. Muzan mocks the story, claiming he has never been punished for his countless cruel acts and that he does not believe in deities or curses. However, something about the encounter with Kagaya makes him uncomfortable, a strange feeling of familiarity. He notices the absence of guards at the mansion and finds it strange that only Kagaya, his wife Amane, and their children are present. When asked about his great dream, Muzan reveals that he seeks total immortality, something he is close to achieving upon finding Nezuko. Kagaya, confident, says that this dream will never be realized. He explains that despite human losses over the years, the Demon Slayer Corps continues to exist, driven by an immortal will to defeat Muzan. He compares this will to the immortality that the Demon King so desires. Using the symbolism of the dragon and the tiger, Kagaya suggests that Muzan, by committing so many atrocities, has awakened the fury of the dragon, the Demon Slayers, who will never allow him to escape unpunished. Muzan, furious, orders Kagaya to be silent, but the leader of the Slayers asks for one last word, saying that even if he dies, his death will not be in vain. He is beloved by his followers, and his departure will strengthen their resolve even further. At that moment, the Hashiras, alerted to the attack on the mansion by their crows, rush to the location in desperate hope of protecting their leader. In a flashback, it is revealed that Kagaya had forbidden the Hashiras from serving as his personal guard, believing they were too valuable to be used merely for his protection. Suddenly, the mansion erupts in flames, surprising Muzan. The explosion, carefully planned, scatters nails across the location, amplifying the destruction and slowing Muzan's regeneration. While trying to recover, he realizes he has fallen into a trap. Tamayo, an ally of the Slayers and former subordinate of Muzan, appears and restrains him with her blood demon art. She reveals that by absorbing her, Muzan ingested a special drug she created that transforms demons into humans. Muzan tries to manipulate Tamayo, reminding her that it was he who turned her into a demon, and that she killed her own husband and child. Tamayo recalls the moment she became a demon, having accepted Muzan's proposal to escape death, but now repentant, she is willing to pay for her mistakes and die there, taking the Demon King with her. Gyomei, the stone Hashira, using his flail and chanting a powerful mantra, delivers a devastating blow that tears off Muzan's head. In a flashback, Gyomei recalls when he first met Kagaya Ubayashiki. At the time, Gyomei was 18 years old and Kagaya only 14. Despite his youth, Kagaya comforted Gyomei, assuring him that he knew he was not a murderer and that he believed in his goodness. The stone Hashira always recalled how Kagaya had the ability to say exactly what people needed to hear. Gyomei was the only Hashira to discuss with Kagaya the possibility of Muzan escaping, and the leader of the Slayers revealed that when the time came, he would sacrifice himself and ask Gyomei not to intervene. The master also wanted to protect his precious children, his disciples, as much as possible from the tragic fate that awaited them. Returning to the battle, Muzan, as expected, regenerates rapidly, healing even his eyes and brain. He was nearly indestructible, but Gyomei knew, as Kagaya had warned, that the only means of defeating the Demon King would be to expose him to sunlight. The great challenge now would be to keep the fight going until dawn. Even with the plans to slow Muzan's regeneration, he continued to heal at an impressive speed. Then, enraged, Muzan uses his technique Bloodburst, launching a devastating attack against Gyomei with blood spikes. However, the stone Hashira defends himself using the third form of stone breathing, deflecting the spikes and emerging unharmed. The remaining Hashiras arrive at the battlefield and take in the scene. Not knowing at first that it was Muzan, they are soon informed by Gyomei, who warns that cutting off his head would have no effect. Upon realizing they were facing the Demon King, the Hashiras immediately activate their breathing techniques. Tanjiro, overcome by rage, also joins them using sun breathing. However, Muzan, cunning, turns the tables and surprises everyone by opening an enormous portal that takes them directly into the Infinity Castle. It is an epic moment in which all the Slayers, including Inosuke, Genya, Murata, Kano, and Zenitsu, fall inside Muzan's bizarre fortress. Unlike previous moments, Zenitsu demonstrates a determined composure. As they try to understand where they are, Muzan appears triumphant, welcoming them to hell, and mocking the Hashiras for thinking they had him cornered. The vastness of the castle filled with demons is revealed, and Muzan promises that on that night he would finish off all the Slayers. However, Tanjiro, undaunted, counters the threat, assuring that the one who will go to hell is Muzan, and swears to do everything in his power to defeat him, no matter what. Tanjiro is saved by Gyu Tomioka, but both fall into a room full of demons. In other areas, Obanai and Mitsuri, Gyomei and Muichiro, and Sanemi face intense battles. Inosuke runs through the castle, Genya tries to survive, and Zenitsu senses the presence of someone familiar. Shinobu Kocho finds Doma, Upper Moon 2, who killed her sister. Even wounded, she poisons Doma with wisteria, but in an intense fight where Shinobu gives everything she has, she cannot hold out and Doma kills her. Even having been poisoned by Shinobu, he resisted and killed her. Kanao arrives too late and witnesses the scene. Zenitsu confronts Kaigaku, now Upper Moon 6, and his former training colleague. While Kaigaku dominates several forms of thunder breathing corrupted by demonic power, Zenitsu, once considered weak, reveals he has perfected the first form and created a new technique, the 7th style, Flaming Thunder God. With it, Zenitsu gives everything he has and, in a very intense fight, defeats Kaigaku, being saved by Yushiro. Meanwhile, Giyu and Tanjiro encounter the powerful Akaza, Upper Moon 3. In another part of the castle, Muzan transforms into a cocoon, absorbing Tamayo and neutralizing the poison that could kill him. Outside the castle, Nezuko is receiving medical attention, and there is hope that she will become human again. With the previous plans having failed, the new objective of the Demon Slayer Corps is to contain Muzan until the sun rises, his only true weakness. On another front, Tanjiro Kamado faces Akaza, Upper Moon 3, dodging his lethal attacks with sun breathing. He manages to cut off one of the enemy's arms, but Akaza quickly regenerates and counterattacks. Giyu Tomioka, the Water Hashira, watches with admiration, remembering the first time he saw Tanjiro. Feeling the strength of his opponent, Akaza decides to fight seriously and activates his blood demon art, the Compass Needle, capable of tracking murderous intent through the flow of vital energy. He attacks with ferocity, facing both Tanjiro and Tomioka. Akaza is brutal, strikes Tomioka and sends him flying far away, leaving Tanjiro alone. Even wounded, Tanjiro challenges Akaza with words that touch his forgotten human past. This triggers buried memories in Akaza, who reacts with even greater aggression. The fight intensifies and Tanjiro realizes that the enemy's blows always target his vital points, guided by what seems like an instinct. When Akaza tries to destroy his sword, Tomioka returns at the last instant and saves Tanjiro, with both of them fighting together again. Tomioka reveals that the Compass Needle allows Akaza to predict attacks and detect fighting intent. Now with the Demon Slayer mark and access to the transparent world, Giyu can face him on equal footing. Tanjiro, sensing the danger, recalls the Compass Needle and the instinct that detects murderous intent. He remembers that Inosuke mentioned an old woman who neutralized this instinct by having no desire to kill, making herself undetectable. With this, Tanjiro tries to fully understand how Akaza's compass works, realizing that everything is connected: intent, the compass, attraction, and absolute perception. At a critical moment, when nearly struck by a fatal blow, Tanjiro recalls his father's teaching about the Fire God dance. By moving with fluidity and a calm mind, it would be possible to achieve perfect bodily harmony and access the transparent world. Tanjiro reaches a new level of power upon accessing the transparent world, a state that elevates his reflexes, strength, and perception to their maximum. In this state, he manages to dodge a lethal attack from Akaza, seeing his organs and vital points. With this, he has for the first time a real chance of defeating him. While Tanjiro fights, Tomioka tries to intervene, but his sword is destroyed by Akaza, who moves to finish him off. At the last instant, Tanjiro cuts the demon's wrist. Akaza activates his Compass Needle in its most aggressive form, launching multiple fatal attacks. Tomioka is sent flying, and Akaza, confident, tries to convince the Hashira to become a demon. At that moment, Akaza realizes he cannot sense Tanjiro's presence, as he has completely suppressed his murderous intent, making himself invisible to the Compass Needle. Seizing this advantage, Tanjiro delivers a decisive blow with sun breathing, decapitating Akaza. Even decapitated, Akaza tries to prevent his own death by holding his head, but Tomioka hurls his broken sword, finalizing the process of disintegration. However, Akaza's body remains standing, showing that he was trying to surpass his own limits, like Muzan, becoming immune to decapitation. While attacking an unconscious Tanjiro, Akaza's human heart resurges. Tomioka tries to protect his friend and is saved by Tanjiro, who awakens just in time. In the end, the human part of Akaza takes control and, rejecting Muzan's influence, uses his own technique to self-destruct, accepting his own death. With the fall of Upper Moon 3, Tanjiro and Tomioka collapse in exhaustion. The news spreads among the allies, and on another front, Kanao prepares to face Doma, Upper Moon 2, seeking to avenge Shinobu Kocho. During the fight, Doma releases his poisonous ice powder, but Kanao is not affected. Before dying, Shinobu had secretly taught her a tactic. Kanao, overcome by fury, faces Doma with flower breathing, striking him with the petal windmill, surprising the demon. During the battle against Doma, Kanao demonstrates extreme skill in deflecting all the enemy's attacks, thanks to her highly trained eyes, which can predict movements by observing subtle muscle contractions. Realizing this, Doma tries to neutralize her vision by targeting her eyes directly and using microscopic ice particles to freeze them. Kanao manages to avoid a direct hit, but is wounded and struck by another technique. Even at a disadvantage, Kanao continues fighting, facing ice statues and traps created by Doma. At a critical moment, he takes her sword and leaves her unarmed, launching his most devastating technique. When everything seemed lost, Inosuke appears unexpectedly, saving her with his beast breathing. Upon realizing that Shinobu is dead, Inosuke is enraged and charges at Doma, managing to confuse him with his unpredictable style and even landing a direct hit. Doma, upon seeing Inosuke's face, recalls a past encounter. He had killed Inosuke's mother, who sacrificed her own life to save him when he was a baby. By way of memory and fury, Inosuke gets back up even though wounded, determined to avenge his mother. Doma tries to disappear with his freezing mist, but Inosuke disperses the attack with his blades. Taking advantage of the distraction, Kanao strikes Doma, forcing him to retreat. As Doma did not want to risk himself against unknown enemies after Akaza's fall, he decides to flee. To do so, he creates an ice clone and an army of frozen puppets to delay Kanao and Inosuke. Despite the obstacles, the two chase after him, determined to prevent his escape. Kanao shouts for Inosuke to hold on a little longer, and Doma does not understand the reason until he realizes too late. The poison begins to take effect. He recalls Shinobu and discovers that she had planned everything. She had spent a year adapting her body to lethal doses of wisteria poison, and upon being devoured, the lethal poison entered Doma's body, beginning his destruction. In desperation, Doma invokes his most powerful technique, a giant ice statue. To defeat him, Kanao uses her final technique, the Blossom Eye, which maximizes her reflexes at the risk of blindness. Combining forces with Inosuke, the two manage to decapitate Doma, thus defeating Upper Moon 2. Meanwhile, Mitsuri and Obanai face Nakime, the manipulator of the Infinity Castle, but are hindered by the control she exerts over the environment. In another area, Muichiro Tokito is separated from the others and ends up face to face with Kokushibo, Upper Moon 1, who recognizes him as being of the same lineage. Even wounded, Tokito activates his Hashira mark and faces Kokushibo with mist breathing, but has his arm cut off. Kokushibo tries to convert him into a demon. Genya tries to intervene but is wounded, until Sanemi appears to protect him, initiating a brutal battle against Kokushibo. Sanemi discovers that Kokushibo's attacks conceal secondary crescent-shaped blades, extremely unpredictable. He intensifies his offensive, but Kokushibo activates his demonic mark, elevating his power. Even so, Sanemi manages to surprise him and uses the effect of his rare blood, which disorients demons. The fight intensifies and the outcome draws near. During the battle against Kokushibo, Sanemi is wounded and his sword is sent flying. He reacts with a hidden pistol, forcing Kokushibo to defend himself and freezing his attack. Before the enemy can finish Sanemi off, Gyomei Himejima arrives and saves him, entering the combat with his powerful chain weapon, hatchet, and iron ball. Gyomei surprises Kokushibo with his strength and agility, as well as using the rare Scarlet Crimson Iron Sand, resistant even to demonic swords. Kokushibo tries to close in, but is overcome by Gyomei's mobility, who traps his sword with the chain. When it appears that Kokushibo is about to be struck, he regenerates his sword with moon breathing, demonstrating his demonic power. With no chance for dialogue, Gyomei reveals that he is saving a secret technique for the fight against Muzan. Meanwhile, Tokito, gravely wounded, decides to use whatever strength he has left to join the fight at Genya's side. Genya reveals his power. By devouring demon flesh, he absorbs their abilities, enabling regeneration and increased strength. Even mutilated, he recovers quickly after ingesting Kokushibo's hair, but this connects him telepathically to Muzan. Genya, Sanemi, and Gyomei attack together. Kokushibo dodges, but ends up losing an ear. The fight intensifies when Sanemi and Gyomei combine their techniques in synchronized attacks. Kokushibo, however, counterattacks with brutal power, gravely wounding both and revealing that his sword can extend freely. Gyomei saves Sanemi from a fatal blow, losing some fingers in the process. Next, Kokushibo unleashes a new technique, thousands of spinning lunar blades, making his sword even more lethal. The battle reaches a new level of intensity, with the Hashiras trying to survive attacks that are almost impossible to evade. Kokushibo attacks furiously and nearly finishes Sanemi, but Muichiro Tokito arrives in time to save him. Genya, inspired by Tanjiro, swallows a fragment of Kokushibo's sword to gain more power. The battle intensifies, with Kokushibo using his moon breathing against the Hashiras. Gyomei briefly accesses the transparent world and perceives Kokushibo's weaknesses, devising a team plan with Sanemi and Tokito. They create a double trap. Gyomei strikes with his chain, Tokito immobilizes the enemy, and Genya fires a pistol loaded with fragments of the demonic sword. The bullets, guided telepathically, hit Kokushibo, causing demonic roots to sprout from his wounds, a technique awakened by Genya. Pinned down, Kokushibo is on the verge of being finished. but releases hundreds of swords from his body, repelling all attacks. Sanemi and Jomei return to the attack, while Tokito, fearing for his companions, risks everything. Jomei's blade turns red, awakening the pillar's mark and burning Kokuchubo from within. Seizing the opening, Genya reinforces the prison with demonic roots. Jomei and Sanemi attack in unison. Their weapons turn red, and a combined blow destroys Kokuchubo's head. However, he regenerates completely, revealing a new form. Upon seeing his monstrous appearance reflected back at him, Kokuchubo recalls his childhood dream to be a samurai. He acknowledges how much he has corrupted himself. This moment of humanity creates a fatal opening, and the Slayers deliver the final blow. Kokuchubo, Upper Moon 1, is at last defeated and dies. As he dies, Kokushibo recalls his life and his brother, reflecting on his transformation into a demon. Sanemi continues attacking, but Jomei restrains him, realizing he is fighting unconsciously. The battle against Kokushibo ends with the tragic deaths of Muichiro Tokito and Genya Shinazugawa. Only Jomei and Sanemi remain to head toward the final confrontation against Muzan Kibutsuji. Tanjiro receives the news of the losses through the crows and, even shaken, continues his journey. However, a squad of rookie slayers arrives at the location before the Hashiras, and the heir to Ubayashiki orders an immediate withdrawal. As if they are absorbed, Muzan will regenerate. Too late, Muzan awakens in a final form and devours all those present. On the way, Tanjiro encounters Yushiro, who feels the death of his master. Reinvigorated, Muzan decides to hunt the surviving Hashiras. They remember that there is still hope to gather the Hashiras and execute Plan B. Hold out until sunrise, for only then can they defeat Muzan. Meanwhile, Mitsuri Kanroji and Obanai Iguro face Upper Moon 4 and try to contain the Infinity Castle. In this chaotic scenario, Muzan finally finds Tanjiro and Jiu Tomioka. Tanjiro, overcome by despair as he remembers his family, is calmed by Jiu to maintain his focus. Muzan begins to speak, but Tanjiro interrupts and challenges him. Even knowing he is practically immortal, the only chance of victory is to buy time until dawn. Muzan attacks with his tentacles. Tanjiro and Jiu dodge, but Tanjiro is gravely wounded in the eye. Jiu saves him, but Muzan reveals he knows of their plans and declares that sunlight will never reach the interior of the Infinity Castle. With the Hashiras who were fighting Upper Moon 4 dead, Tanjiro, now with only one eye, continues to fight with rage. At the moment he is about to be defeated, Mitsuri and Obanai appear to save him, restraining Muzan. Muzan Kibutsuji manages to see through the eyes of his demons and, through Nakime, Upper Moon 4 believes 2 Hashiras have been killed. However, Yushiro had deceived Nakime, taking control of the fortress and manipulating her visions. When the battle intensifies, Yushiro begins controlling the castle to help the Hashiras, forcing Muzan to kill Nakime, causing the fortress's destruction. With the fortress crumbling, everyone falls outside, and Muzan's plan is disrupted. The intention was to use Nakime to keep the castle closed until the sun rose. But now, with only an hour and a half until dawn, the Slayers need to hold Muzan in the open field. Muzan, furious, attacks with his tentacles, revealing that he knows the plan. Mitsuri Kanroji and Obanai Iguro try to face him and manage to cut his neck, but Muzan regenerates instantly. Giyu Tomioka joins the fight, and when Muzan prepares the finishing blow, recruits appear to protect the pillars, sacrificing themselves. Muzan reveals that his attacks contain his blood, which acts as a lethal poison. Tanjiro is poisoned and is on the brink of death. Sensing this, Nezuko awakens and runs to help him. Meanwhile, the Hashiras continue facing Muzan. Mitsuri nearly dies but is saved by Gyomei. Sanemi attacks from behind, drives his sword into Muzan's head, and detonates flasks of alcohol with a match, setting the enemy ablaze. Muzan, however, keeps fighting. Now the Hashiras need to hold him until dawn. Nezuko, sensing her brother's imminent death, runs in his direction, which represents an enormous risk. If Muzan finds her, he may absorb her power of immunity to the sun. Nezuko, confused upon seeing the silhouette of her father, begins to fully awaken. The spiritual presence of her father appears and comforts her, saying that she needs to leave, initiating her final transformation. While the surviving Hashiras face Muzan on the battlefield, Giyu Tomioka orders Murata to take Nezuko to safety, upon realizing that Tanjiro is dying. In this state between life and death, Tanjiro has a vision and encounters his ancestor, who had known Yoriichi, the legendary sun-breathing user. Yoriichi shares his story. After losing his family to demons, he decided to become a slayer and teach the powerful sun-breathing. Because it was difficult to master, variations arose such as water breathing, flame breathing, and thunder breathing. Yoriichi believes he was born to face Muzan and when he found him, he saw for the first time fear in the eyes of the Demon King. During the battle, Yoriichi used the transparent world and identified 7 hearts and 5 brains in Muzan, piercing them all with his blade. Even on the verge of death, Muzan split himself into 1,800 pieces. Yoriichi destroyed most of them, but the remainder escaped and regenerated the villain's body, proving that he had evolved. After this, Muzan fled and hid for years, fearing Yoriichi. Tamayo, a witness to the fight, freed herself from Muzan's control and decided to help him. Over time, she took on the mission of destroying the Demon King. Despite his strength, Yoriichi was expelled from the organization for having let Muzan escape, and also because his twin brother had become a demon, that being Kokushibo Upper Moon 1. His technique and his legacy were forgotten. Back to the current battle, Muzan in his final form attacks with his tentacles. Giyu, Mitsuri, Obanai, Sanemi, and Gyume resist, but are exhausted. Muzan, tireless, adapts to each one's fighting style, becoming more precise and lethal, while the Hashiras lose access to the transparent world, their main advantage. During the final battle against Muzan, Mitsuri is mortally wounded, leaving only 4 Hashiras. Obanai charges into the attack, but faces the difficulty of dodging Muzan's poisoned tentacles, which slowly intoxicate the Slayers. With over an hour until dawn, it seemed impossible to hold out that long. When everything seemed lost, a cat appears and throws vials with antidotes prepared by Tamayo before her death. This not only cures the Hashiras, but also reinvigorates them, allowing them to return to the fight. However, Muzan regenerates quickly, rendering their arms nearly useless against him. Obanai realizes the only chance is to awaken the Red Blade, as Tokito had done before. On the verge of being struck, he manages to do so, but it seems too late, and he is apparently killed by Muzan. Unexpectedly, Muzan's arm is cut off. Without understanding what happened, he discovers that Inosuke, Zenitsu, and Kanao were hidden using camouflage techniques created by Tamayo. They save Obanai and join the fight. Obanai, still alive, strikes Muzan with his red blade, which affects the villain and strains his regeneration. Gyume, encouraged by the joint effort, also manages to awaken his red blade and strike Muzan, realizing that there is finally a real chance of defeating him. Zenitsu, Kanao, and Inosuke distribute Tamayo's invisibility papers to their allies, while Muzan, weakened and increasingly unpredictable, becomes even more dangerous. But now the key to his defeat, the red blade, is in the hands of the Slayers. Tomioka and Sanemi awaken their red blades, increasing the Hashira's hope, while the messenger crow announces 1 hour and 3 minutes until dawn. Assistants tend to the wounded and try to save Tanjiro from the intoxication, but he resists and awakens for the fight. With the red blades, the Hashiras, together with Inosuke, Zenitsu, and Tamayo's invisibility papers, manage to see Muzan's weak points through the transparent world. Evening the combat, the objective was only to hold him until sunrise, not to defeat him immediately. However, the situation deteriorates rapidly. Gyume loses a leg, Tomioka loses an arm, and the others are knocked down, leaving only Kanao, who is paralyzed with fear. When Muzan is about to deliver the final blow, Tanjiro reappears with half his face consumed by the poison, cutting Muzan with sun breathing. Tanjiro begins the final duel by recalling the memory of his ancestor Yoriichi, who taught him the sun dance and gifted him with his earrings. He knows the 12 movements of the technique, but needs to execute the 13th combination, all of them simultaneously. Muzan attacks with tentacles that move independently and unpredictably, making the fight extremely difficult. Tanjiro counters using the sun dance, but still cannot deliver the finishing blow. As the fight progresses, Muzan becomes more dangerous, and Tanjiro, despite awakening the red blade, does not reach Yoriichi's level of power. Muzan knows that Tanjiro is not a threat matching his ancestor, but Tanjiro only needs time. He sees Muzan's weak points through the transparent world, but the villain changes his style and regains the advantage. With just over an hour until dawn, the poison, the fear, and the exhaustion affect Tanjiro, whose organs begin to fail while he continues executing the sun dance against Muzan. Muzan sensed he was weakening, though he did not yet fully understand the reason. Upon accessing Tamayo's memories, he discovered that she had created several types of poison, one that made him more human, hindering his regeneration, another that accelerated his cellular aging, slowing his recovery, a third that prevented his cellular division, blocking his ability to flee, and a fourth that destroyed his debilitated cells. He was already suffering aging equivalent to thousands of years, and was growing slow and vulnerable. Meanwhile, Tanjiro executed the 12 movements of the sun dance, reaching the 13th and managed to wound Muzan with the red blade. Obanai, even blind, fought to protect Tanjiro by using his snake to anticipate the enemy's attacks. Muzan, furious, attacked personally, but was already showing signs of fatigue and weakness, with the old scars from Yoriichi still visible on his body. With 40 minutes until dawn, Muzan, sensing his vulnerability, tried to flee. Tanjiro and Obanai pursued him. Obanai gravely wounded him with the red blade, followed by an attack from Tanjiro with sun breathing. Nezuko, upon seeing the destruction, activated her healing power upon remembering the traumatic past with Muzan. Muzan felt cornered, knowing the Hashiras had been cured and would return to the fight. Attempting to escape, Muzan discovered he could no longer explode himself to flee, due to another poison that blocked that ability. Internally, Tamayo revealed that the 4 poisons together were destroying Muzan, and he feared the imminent end. Muzan, weakened by the poisons, could not break down the substances in his body quickly enough, particularly while fighting Tanjiro, and with dawn approaching, he needed time he did not have. In a moment of fury, he exploded with force, knocking down Obanai, Tanjiro, and others who were wounded and exhausted. Then Inosuke appeared to defend his friends and face Muzan, while Nezuko tried to hold them for 20 minutes until sunrise. Despite the difficulties and the wounds, Tanjiro realized that his red blade could cut the flow of Muzan's poison blood, using the demonic blood itself against him. The battle continued with Tanjiro, Inosuke, and Zenitsu fighting together, slowly gaining ground. Sanemi became trapped, impaled by Muzan, but managed to hold him until Obanai returned to the fight, disarming and wounding Muzan, who lost both arms. Muzan tried to devour Tanjiro, but Obanai sacrificed himself to protect him. Dawn arrived and the sun began to burn Muzan. He launched an explosion that nearly brought Tanjiro down, but Jiyu helped him maintain his red blade active. In desperation, Muzan created a giant armor to try to escape the sunlight, but the Hashiras joined forces to hold him, cutting the armor until it began to disintegrate. The fight ended with the death of Muzan, the greatest demon in the history of humanity, or did it? Tanjiro, however, was lying on the ground, gravely wounded and missing an arm, still holding his sword. Nezuko arrived, but it was too late. Tanjiro had died. Inside the armor, in a final act, Muzan tried to transfer all his blood and power into Tanjiro, creating within him the perfect demon, immune to the sun, ensuring that his legacy would survive even after death. Muzan was alive in Tanjiro. Tanjiro awakens transformed into a perfect demon, immune to the sun and obedient to Muzan's will, fulfilling the Demon King's dream of creating such a being. With his arm regenerated, he begins to attack his former companions. Despite the shock and the pain, his friends try to stop him, reminiscing about the good times they shared, but nothing works. Tanjiro is now the new Demon King, extremely powerful. Nezuko and Zenitsu try to reach him, but Tanjiro releases an overwhelming demonic power. Kanao realizes that, despite the transformation, the human Tanjiro still resists internally, as he does not feed like a common demon. Within himself, Tanjiro wages a battle against Muzan's demonic influence, which tries to dominate him but is defeated. Tanjiro recovers his humanity and rejects the demon's power. With the cure, Muzan's reign ends. All the demons linked to his blood disappear, except those whose links were severed by Tamayo, such as Nezuko and Yushiro. Tanjiro awakens with Nezuko human, though with lasting effects, partial loss of vision, and the inability to use one arm. Modified by the Demon King's power, Yushiro and his demon cat bid farewell, their presence being important for future events. Of the Hashiras, only Giyu Tomioka and Sanemi Shinazugawa survived. Tengen Uzui also lives, but retired after losing an arm. The other Hashiras died in the battle. Tanjiro, Zenitsu, and Inosuke survived, but did not become Hashiras. The story advances to an extra chapter set in the future, in Tokyo in the modern era, where the characters have been reincarnated. The plot begins with Agatsuma Yoshiteru reading a book about his ancestor Zenitsu, while his sister Toko scolds him for not studying. They are descendants of Zenitsu and Nezuko, reincarnations that arise from the union between the two, forming a new family. We also have the reincarnation of Uzui, now an Olympic athlete. Unosuke is reborn as a scientist who studies the spider lily, the plant responsible for the origin of Muzan. The plant blooms only a few times a year and only during the day, explaining why Muzan, who only went out at night, never found it. We also meet Kamado Kanata and his brother Sumihiko, the reincarnated representations of Kanao and Tanjiro, children of the original couple. Kanata tries to wake Sumihiko, who is running late for school. Brothers Kurama and Katsuma talk about the Slayers who died to save the world and were reborn to live in peace. Other characters, such as the girls from the temple, Kanao's adoptive siblings, and former Hashiras like Obanai and Mitsuri, reappear in new lives. Obanai and Mitsuri are now a couple who runs a restaurant. The reincarnation of Gyome Himejima lives peacefully as an early childhood teacher, caring for children like Sumihiko. The Tanjiro of the future is a restless high schooler who does parkour to get to school, passing by elderly people who represent former characters like Zenitsu and Urokodaki. During his run, he avoids police officers who represent the Shinazugawa brothers and crosses paths with children who represent Tomioka, Sabito, and Makomo. After everything, the characters finally meet again. The students observe a painting of Tamayo made by the artist Shiro, possibly the same demon who survived and acts as a guardian, together with a demon cat, suggesting he is still present in the world. Shiro's exact identity is left open, reinforced by the fact that he appears with his back turned. Sumihiko Kamado is surprised by his friend Rengoku, who also had a happy ending, and together they flee from school while being chased by the police officers who represent Genya and Sanemi, who cannot catch up with them. Murata, the assistant who helped Tanjiro, is also alive. Sumihiko's mother receives a phone call from the school complaining about her son's behavior. In the background appear Tanjiro's earrings and sword and a photograph with all the survivors of the final battle. And so concludes the story of Demon Slayer, Kimetsu no Yaiba, one of the greatest anime and manga ever produced. I hope you enjoyed the summary. Know that these summaries take a great deal of work, so if you can leave a like or a comment, that helps a lot and makes YouTube deliver the content to more people. It took quite an effort, but the result was worth it. It came out as an incredible video. I hope you enjoyed it. If you did, subscribe to the channel and check out the other summaries showing on the screen. Just click and watch. I'll see you in the next anime summary.